OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
All right, it's bang on 7:30. The weekend starts here. It's the Thursday of a massive Six Nations weekend. There is good quality hurling for us to look forward to. There is good quality Premier League, etc., and plenty more for us to look back on as well. So let's be having you. Whatever you're having this morning, we want to hear about it. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Or, of course, you can always use the hashtag OTBAM. You can tweet us at OffTheBallAM, or you can leave a comment on the YouTube stream. Owen, how are you?
Good, Ger. How are you getting on?
Yeah, pretty good. It was... the rugby is kind of the main thing that everybody's starting to talk about, but the football last night was fairly spectacular. Not if you're a Spurs fan. I just saw John Duggan tweeting, "I hate VAR," and I was like, something bad has happened here. And then check live score. It was like, the little X on the ball that says, no, goal disallowed.
Correctly.
I didn't see it.
And also, Heung-min Son's goal should have been disallowed. It was incorrectly awarded, so
screw Spurs.
VAR refused to help him on that occasion and did screw him over later on, but rightly so.
In the meantime, it's the thing I always bang on about. You just want to feel alive as a sports fan. Well, you do that when you're watching Villa. It's like 1-0 down, they're getting absolutely killed. Should have been 2-0. You're like, oh, this isn't great. And then it's like 3-1 in the blink of an eye. Wow, this is amazing. Mm-hmm. And then they start defending like schoolboys. You're like, well, it's going to be a roller coaster, whatever happens here.
And how it all finishes. I mean, you talk about schoolboys. You can hear me typing there. I am Googling Daniel James' height, and I'm Googling Tyrone Mings' height. I'm not sure if you have either of those things.
I'd say Mings is 6'2", and I'd say Dan James is 5'9".
How does that happen then? That Daniel James rises above Tyrone Mings to not into the back?
Diego Maradona and Peter Shilton is the old one. Once you realise that can happen in your life, anything can happen.
He didn't use his hands.
It's the size of the fight and the dog, not the size of the dog and the fight. It's 7:32 this morning. We will come back to the Villa game, and we'll talk about the Liverpool game tonight a little bit later on. But in the meantime, let's talk rugby, and I'm delighted to say Ronan O'Gara is with us this morning. Ronan, good morning to you. How are you?
Hey, Jar. How's it going?
Yeah, very good.
So the reception is a little bit dodgy, but hopefully we'll get through it.
No worries. The French are talking the Irish up here, saying we're favourites, and it's very interesting. It's like, I guess they're making sure there are no hostages to fortune, no stray words. They don't really believe that, though, do they?
I would say everyone was probably a little bit shocked, I suppose, by Ireland's opening 40 minutes, I think, for a first Six Nations game, considering I think there was one pan of the camera which encapsulated the difficult conditions in the Aviva when we saw the swirling wind effect. And for Ireland to play the rugby, I suppose, with that tempo, accuracy, discipline for it wasn't an 80-minute performance, but for 50 minutes anyway. I think people probably expected Ireland to hit the ground running, but maybe not as effective as that. And I think as a result, we watched, and the French watched over here, England, Scotland, England in Murrayfield, an average game. And then in Sunday in Stade de France with very difficult conditions. The French team playing Italy, and it was years removed from what was seen in the Aviva. So I think certainly high alert.
So are people surprised by that, Ronan, or is it just kind of coming to it new? Like, were they not maybe reading too much into Ireland's November form?
We all have short memories, especially people when they're just concentrating on their own team. And I think obviously there was definitely an overreaction in France to their victory over New Zealand in the November series, a week after Ireland, wasn't it? So obviously New Zealand were coming into the game in Stade de France against France, rattled, disturbed, annoyed, angered by their performance in Dublin. But France, one could say, were probably more convincing in that performance. So I think obviously there was a definite overreaction in that regard, and then they kind of realised, well, we've won a friendly in Stade de France in November. The World Cup is 2 years away, so we need to kind of make steps, and that's, I think, where it becomes tricky when the French start to think about it, because they're very, very good in playing in kind of chaos or in the disorder, playing free and playing in the moment, but setting out the roadmap for being victorious in Rugby World Cup. One of the, I suppose, the key components or key tick-offs for them to achieve as a team was to win the Six Nations. So they don't have the out that this game is in Dublin. So seemingly there's a lot of pressure on boys in camp this week.
That's very interesting, that the fact that pressure is beginning to build, because from our perspective, it's looked like what they're doing makes perfect sense. They're bringing through a crop of youngsters. They're giving them endless amount of game time in preparation for a home World Cup. They've discovered some genuine superstars. They're making sure they're strength and depth. But that added level of expectation, that little bit of the stuff that we don't know what their psychological strength is going to be when it really comes down to it. You can't fake that. You have to go through it. They have to have setbacks and they have to overcome them, and that's the bit where they become a team who lives up to the hype. Yeah,
and like they have huge strength and depth. There is most definitely that in French rugby, but it's also dependent on a few key players. I think even from a backline point of view, Vermi Vatakaya is looking for his top form. When he's in top form, he's very, very near unplayable, but he hasn't been at that level. Can he get to it? I probably think he can, but it's very hard to get that. Now in a top Six Nations game, Jalibert, his impact after 50 minutes, very few people in world rugby can do what he can do with his acceleration, but he's not there. So all of a sudden, if France were to lose Entimac after 11 minutes, for example, it means Ramos coming in, who doesn't play club rugby at 10 at all. Yes, he's formed there, as they say in French, but it's very different being formed and playing there in your youth as opposed to kind of running the ship week in, week out. Never mind at club level, but also in the heat of battle of a French Irish top Six Nations game. So I think there's a realisation probably in France that Ireland have, I think under Farrell, consistently developed their game in the fact that there's threats for Ireland all over the pitch now, be it front row, back three, middle of the park, and then unleashing a really, really interesting bench.
It's interesting on top of that then how some of the Ireland players have also developed away from the game plan as individuals, and Matt Williams was making the point on the show earlier this week that some of the players have just shown a greater skill set as a result of the work being done over the last year or 18 months. Is that the same in France? Are you noticing your players coming back from French camp in a better place, or maybe in a less detrimental state than they would have been, I don't know, when you were working at Racing, for example, when things weren't so good in the national team?
Yeah, that blew me away. I think I'll never forget. I suppose that on my coaching journey was a key kind of point when and I have to be selective in the language I use, and that when you had certain players where, they weren't enthralled to go to national camp, to say it as best I can. It left a mark on me, because as a player I was, just out of the game going into coaching, and it just struck me as this is not what international rugby is about, that where you can't see guys bursting to get to national camp, because it is the epitome of everything you want to achieve as a rugby player. Yeah, club game is fantastic, but the test level is something else altogether, and you see that on Saturday with the anthems and with the, I suppose, just with the intensity of the opening 10 minutes when two teams go at it. But just it is a very different I suppose mindset now, in the fact that Galtier has created a very happy camp in France with a lot of expert coaches. I suppose, as you say, there's so much more to it behind the scenes than just the 80 minutes that's involved, in terms of, obviously nutritionists, sleep consultants, everything with the little detail just to getting that 1% extra come the weekend. But it's poles apart from I suppose from 2014, 15, 16, that's for certain.
It's amazing how quickly they've made progress and how quickly they got everything aligned, and a lot of credit has to go to Laporte, I guess, in the background for that. Matt Williams understatedly referred to him as a controversial figure, which is true. But in terms of winning the rights to host the World Cup and then putting the process in place to make sure that you give yourself the best chance of winning it, I don't think anybody can argue with that part of what he's done. I do want to ask you a little bit about, though, if you're in the French camp this week and you watch what Ireland have done over the last two periods, really, the improvement in performance and the options that they have whenever the ball carrier gets the ball. How do you stop that? What's the French defence? What's Sean Edwards thinking this week?
I would say Sean Edwards is obviously a hugely experienced and interesting coach, and I'm sure he'll have a plan or a trick or two up his sleeve. There's no doubt about it. But I think, I suppose the one asterisk is that Ireland's form has been exceptional in the Aviva, and I think it is so much more difficult playing in away games. Be it in Six Nations or be it going on the summer tour to New Zealand. That's where I think you'll have a far better idea of where the team is really at. Yeah, there's huge excitement, but I think by my count, I think was it 8 British and Irish Lions were missing from Wales. It was an unrecognisable team. I think you saw then why. Josh Adams, a winger playing 13, how it's a completely different position, and you can get, exploited in that position. But Wales were, I suppose, the greatest surprise for me watching it was that Wales managed to keep Ireland to 10 points for 20 minutes. That was a huge, huge achievement on their behalf, because it was one-way traffic for most of the game, and Ireland would be, I think, incredibly disappointed to give away the try that they did give away, because it wasn't necessarily a smart play from Ty Byrne, probably one of his only poor decision of the day, but it was actually, you could see it happening, which is unlike the speed of thought that all the Irish players exuded last Saturday. So this is a big test, and the fact that it's fascinating. There's something built into your DNA when you're a test player, and the fact that even if it's Six Nations, that you just when the games are one-score games after 60 minutes in an hour, and you're in your home venue, there's something inside you just goes, you just have to find a way to win. While sometimes away from home, you get the feeling that this could be not bonus territory, but the fact that you could be kind of going, okay, let's see how this plays out. But you cannot lose your home games in the Six Nations. It's just not allowed under any circumstances. So with that, I suppose inside you, that fight to get the result that you need for your team. And I think I'm not too into my stats, but one of the stats, the victories loaded for the home team is quite astonishing, I believe, in the Six Nations history.
I think scoring first has also turned out to have a correlation with victory. It's not that ridiculous either when you think about it. But getting an advantage and being able to play from the front is hugely important for both these teams. But so is it almost like less what the plans France are going to have to slow down Ireland's attack? That's less important than France.
Oh, sorry, yeah. To answer your question, George, exactly. So what would be different? I would say you're probably, up front, what would be different between the red and the blue jerseys within a week is the guy in blue would probably be 15 kgs more powerful and in the fact, and probably heavier in terms of weight. The French pack between Antonia Marchand and Cyril Bay are big lumps. Then they have Willemsen. They'll, I suppose, contrast that with Waukee in the second row for speed and a bit of tempo in their game, and their back row have an awful lot of, actions in the game, so they get through an awful lot of work. So in terms of ball carrying from Ireland's point of view, it looked very easy for the backs, because Ireland kept winning the gain line, they kept winning collisions, they kept finding space. Sometimes at test level it's hard to find space, even though there is always space there, but sometimes the kicking game becomes very important. That's where I think it'll be very interesting to see at the weekend, because France, I think, will be very, very, solid and secure from the ruck to maybe 30 metres away from the ruck. But I think Ireland can get joy potentially between the touchline and the far 15 metres on both sides. So, I think we saw in the build up to Johnny's drop goal a few years ago, that little thing for Earlsey, I think that play will be probably an option this week, in the fact that they'll be hard off the line in front under Edwards. They'll just go hard, and they'll look to chop and hit green jerseys as frequently as possible. If they can do that with discipline, it's very, very interesting. Contrary, if your heartbeat is going near 200 beats per minute, your decision making is probably not as where it needs to be, and that can potentially enable players to make poor decisions, i.e. cheap shots in the back, late tackles, losing probably your tackle entry into stopping your opponents, which means high shots, yellow cards, red cards. The possibilities are endless, but it makes it fascinating from a viewer's point of view.
Okay, that is interesting, because like we've seen in this match in recent seasons, sometimes you get pinged for those off the ball stuff, and sometimes you don't. You get away with it, and the team who gets away with it, everybody's like, oh yeah, that was great, well done, you got away with it. And the team who doesn't get away with it is like, well, what the hell were you doing? That was stupid. So I guess it depends on which side you come out on. From an Ireland perspective, and you're looking at Dupont and Entomac, you've obviously come up against them at club level in the build up to the game during that week. What can Ireland do? What do you say to your players when it's like, okay, we know these guys are really good, don't give them space, don't let them get ahead of steam? It's like, yeah, well, I guess all well and good saying this, but like, how do I do that?
Sure, I just lost an away game to Biarritz in the last play of the game, and I've lost 2 finals to Toulouse, and you're trying to push me over the edge here. Yes, exactly. How do you stop Dupont? Well, I didn't stop him in 2 finals, and he has 2 more medals than I have. So it's very, very difficult to stop a player of his calibre. I think he's probably different to any other player in the fact that usually rules, disciplined rules, absolute simple rules around the breakdown enables your team to probably have a satisfactory night or a decent night if they apply their rules around the ruck. With Dupont, he can make any defensive system look very, very silly, because I think people underestimate, especially people from a distance, I think his strength. He's incredibly strong, incredibly powerful, but I think what separates him most from a traditional 9 is he comes alive in broken play. And that's where this French team probably thrive, is the fact they call it désordre, is it? Or in Ireland, I think Stuart Lancaster would call it being comfortable in chaos. And that's where these guys come alive with kind of jeu debout, is kind of staying upright and make. I remember Axel always said, if you play in France, make sure they ruck. Make sure you make them ruck. They don't like falling to ground, and they don't like cleaning out the ball. They always try and keep the ball off the ground at every possibility. Perfect example being Aldridge try for Gabon Villiers. That's not in the playbook. That's someone taking the initiative, trusting his instinct, running a good line, attracting 2 Italian defenders, and then he just little soft offload gives Villiers a one-on-one, and he seems like a really good finisher, and he scores a try. So yeah, I think what you probably need to do, and it's something that probably isn't recommended, but it was something that I think was successful when I was in the coaching setup with the Crusaders. We kind of double marked Bowden Barrett for us, because when the ball wasn't in his hands, I thought, okay, my chance is a better chance of performing. I think when the ball isn't in Dupont's hands, Ireland have a better chance of getting the result or the performance they want. So, you obviously have to be very connected defensively, but I think no matter how great the players are, if you take away their time and space, attackers don't like it.
That Axel quote, make sure France ruck, is that still true of this France team, or have they managed to move away from it? Because
it's so true. It's so true. That's their natural game. They love it. They don't like the kind of, you know what I mean, where Ireland were brilliant under Schmidt and excellent around the ruck, and you see it with Paul O'Connell nowadays. Just their detail for the ball carrier and the 2 nearest, how they because of their fitness levels, because of their attention to detail, because of their willingness to care for their teammate, to secure ball. But the French, they probably try to follow an English, Irish, Anglo-Saxon model potentially between the years. They'd never admitted between the years of up to Galtier, maybe when they were kind of lost their way a little bit, but now they kind of have gone back to their identity and what they believe in is best. And the French rugby, they want to accelerate the game, they want to play with tempo, they want to play with a little bit of recklessness in a structure, but I think the word, what Axel's words, they still ring true. You know what I mean? You got to get them to ground, hit them hard, chop their legs, get them to the ground. Because if they're able to kind of, you know what I mean, control the ball at contact and just kind of fend and offload, then they're gone. And you're like, oh God, where's he gone to? And it's too late. You know what I mean? You don't buy your defensive line that 3 seconds by chopping them and getting them to the ground and getting a poacher in the ball to try and slow down. So, I mean, the ruck will be fascinating this weekend, or the contact area, whatever way you want to name it, offensively and defensively.
Go on.
Just on that then, like, I mean, does that mean that France need to, I guess, rethink how they play at the ruck, or maybe their emphasis on it? Just given South Africa maybe being the reigning World Cup champions, if we're looking at this in a World Cup context.
Yeah, but then you're looking at the past, you know, that sport has moved on. That's 2 years ago. You're looking at what's happening now and what's going to be, I suppose, better or more influential in this Six Nations and for the summer series. So it's constantly evolving. I think what you got to admire about the French is that when they play their game the way they play it, it's incredibly effective and it wins competitions as well. I think, as we said last week's show, that the fact that they haven't won something from 2010, I think they're aware of that now and they want to put that right. But I mean, Ireland are most definitely in form, but it's a very, very difficult game to call. And the fact that I think the great thing about it is weather forecast on Saturday is meant to be good in Paris, so hopefully both teams will be able to play, and then it'll be just fascinating to see I suppose how teams go about trying to break down the other team. But in terms of France needing to review their ruck, no, I think their policy for the way they play it is very interesting.
Matt Williams has a theory that Irish people are creative, and that what Andy Farrell has done is tapped into our own national identity, much the same way you're talking about the French there, and that what we're seeing is the full expression of who we are as a country, not just as rugby players. And I like the theory because, you know, we're playing great rugby and we're winning, so I'm happy to get on board that. Is there anything in that, do you think?
No, not really. I think it's always looked upon differently when you're after winning 8 or 9 games in a row. That's the situation for this team, and when they continue winning, it's everything seems probably a little bit more rosier than it is. Then if you get a belt, you just have to, I think, depending on how you see the game or what your role is, whether you're with the team or a supporter, you just gotta, I suppose, analyse it with yourself. But I think, this team under Farrell has I think they know how they want to play, and yeah, that ties into their identity. But I think certainly Irish teams for a long period of time have known how they wanted to play. What's interesting at the minute is that the skill levels of certain forwards is measuring up against the best in the world, and hence Ireland have multi-threats around the park.
What's going to happen? Who's going to win?
It's hard to call. I think the fact that the game's in Stade de France, France have to win. I think. Will they be able to beat an incredibly, I suppose, disciplined Irish team? That's the big question mark in my head. And the fact that there's nearly, I suppose, 3 elements of performance we're looking at this weekend. We're looking at the performance of the French team, the Irish team, and also the performance of the referee. And you try and take them out of the equation, but in Test rugby, the man in the middle has such an important role in these games, and his interpretation of the laws of the game and his capacity to read situations is because it's played under such fine margins. I think what would be brilliant from a neutral's point of view would be that I think you're going to see teams express themselves. I would be surprised if there was that kind of emphasis on the yes, there will be an emphasis on the kicking game, but I just think with the people on show, and especially someone like Mac Hansen to do what he did in his first game, if you kick loosely, you get punished on Saturday. And I think before, in these kind of games of chess or cat and mouse or kick tennis, there was sometimes a kind of, well, you have a go first and we'll see how we can do it. But I think nowadays, I think Ireland are so good at holding the ball. It'll be interesting to see how France, I suppose, look to gain field possession, because field position is very, very important, along with the set piece as well.
All right, should be a cracker. Ronan, great stuff. Thanks a million.
All right, cheers, lads. Thank you.
It's Ronan O'Gara giving us his pre-match thoughts ahead of Ireland against France at the weekend. Have you told us what you think is going to happen?
Not really, just that was very interesting. It's hard to kind of not be persuaded by what he's saying there about the home fixtures and that France really are favourites for this. Like, I mean, Entimac really can't believe that Ireland are favourites.
I think that is like unfortunately it seems like they have every box ticked. They have their strength and conditioning ticked, they have the players wanting to play for the country ticked, they have their style of play ticked, and they have their pre-match psychology all baked in. It's like this, and the age profile is sensational for this group that the French have at the moment. Like,
the only thing that can pull them down now is like some rogue agent like Philippe Saint-André in the media talking nonsense about Ireland or something, or some doctors coming out to talk about Sexton again this year. Remember that?
Yeah.
That was this time last year. It was France right after Wales, wasn't it? So like it's
was it
like
not
that.
2 years ago before we were at the Paris game?
It felt like we were in lockdown when
we were, though. Oh, we were just starting lockdown.
Paris game never happened last year, or Paris game never happened 2 years ago.
Okay, yeah.
It was later in the year.
It was around about now that the match was cancelled, but all the Italians came to Ireland anyway from COVID ravaged Italy. And we're like, this doesn't make sense. I'm not sure about this.
Exactly, that ability to pin it all on the Italians. You couldn't get a COVID test unless you were in Italy the previous week.
OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with the new and improved razors. This is OTB AM. It's 7:57 this morning. We started with Ronan O'Gara because he's in transit. Loads of comments coming through there. Just on the thing about Dupont, right? And they were talking about double marking Bowden Barrett. Do you think that the Ireland defence decides that they're going to sacrifice something? So Van der Fleer finishes top of the tackle count all the time. But do you say, I don't want you doing 27 to 40 tackles. I want you doing 12, but I want them all on Dupont. And you hit him. When he's there, you smash him, no matter what it is. So everybody else has to pick up the slack, and you just decide that in NFL, if there's a running quarterback, they send a spy whose job it is just to watch the quarterback's eyes, and if he's going to run, then your job is to take him, and if he gets past you, you're screwed. So like the whole defence is based on this one person being able to do this job exceptionally well, and it's possible that Dupont sidesteps Van der Fleer, and it's like, well, there's a try, no matter what position you are in the field, because like everybody else has their job done and they're actually making up for him. So I don't know, is there a possibility something like that happens?
Absolutely. Also, like, I mean, the one challenge you'd have in that scenario is just the pace of Dupont and the pace for them to move the ball side to side. So Van der Fleer being able to do that effectively will come down to how effectively Ireland would be able to slow the ball down at the ruck, which means that you could have that spy situation, because if you're Josh Van der Fleer, Dupont could very well be right in front of you, and then he's 50 metres away, and it's very hard to keep track of him on that front. So maybe slowing the game down is exactly what Ireland are going to want to do when France are in possession. And I do find that conversation that Ronan O'Gara was talking about there very interesting, about the two different styles that are possibly the dominant ones in world rugby at the moment. Like, I mean, we can't forget that South Africa beat the British and Irish Lions last year. And okay, there was different factors at play, but they're still, they haven't gone away, you know.
No, they haven't.
And
they haven't.
I just wonder, is there like
But isn't it interesting that like the French believe our style is who we need to be?
Yeah.
And we have our philosophy. We're going to do our thing, and you can do your thing, but us copying your version is going to be a lesser version of yours.
Yeah, and that's absolutely the way people should be thinking about it. I just wonder if they're We will know a lot more come Sunday evening or Saturday evening, but I wonder is this French team possibly the best at that version of rugby in the Six Nations? But like, I guess what Ireland is in an ideal world is a hybrid of both of those, where you do have that flair and that artistry along with the pretty tough aggression up front. And I mean, it's those combinations of things that tend to win World Cups as well.
Yeah, front foot defending, aggressive fighting, and then, I mean, Matt Williams said very nice things about our creativity, and when you think about it, he's actually right.
Yeah, I mean, he did an exceptional job of tickling our belly.
He did. We felt very tickled. 8 o'clock this morning, get in touch. 087 9180 180 is the WhatsApp number, and you're going to need that to enter our competition. Today's the last day to enter our brilliant competition, because now you have to be available for this if you win it. You can't just, oh yeah, I've entered the competition. A trip to Paris, buddy, tomorrow, this weekend, to see the game, so you have to be available. 2 nights accommodation in Paris. It's all courtesy of our friends at AerLingus, the official airline sponsor of the Irish rugby team, bringing home advantage to wherever the team plays. And to celebrate, we have an amazing prize: a pair of match tickets, flights and 2 nights accommodation to be won for this weekend's Six Nations clash between France and Ireland in Paris, as well as a signed Ireland rugby jersey. Today's daily winner will win an Irish rugby jersey and be in our draw at 9:25 for the amazing overall prize. To enter, just tell us who our mystery voice is.
Say that's unfair is just ridiculous, and you shouldn't be asking those questions.
Nah, let's hear it one more time. We're going to ask anyway.
Say that's unfair is just ridiculous, and you shouldn't be asking those questions.
It is ridiculous to say it's unfair. We're entitled to ask those questions. To enter, you can WhatsApp his name to 087 9 180 180. You can tweet us at Off The Ball, or you can comment on our YouTube channel. This morning, our daily winner will be announced before 9. And they'll win an Ireland rugby jersey and go into the draw at 9:25 for the grand prize. Right, some of your comments from earlier on. Why was Josh Adams put in at 13, asks Star O'Toole, when he's such a prolific winger? It looked like a massive selection error. I think they were... who are the available bodies this week? You can go in there. And also they have they tried George North there and it worked. So I guess they're thinking, this has worked for us before.
And maybe as well, if they kind of looked at a fairly fluid situation in the back line, they might have thought that Adams could have popped up in the wing where Wales got into a bit of possession during the game, but as it turned out, they just didn't really get their eye in whatsoever when it came to controlling the game.
Is Murray a better call than Gibson Park in terms of defending against Dupont, asks Peter. I don't think it's close at the moment. It doesn't feel close, does it? You wouldn't say that James Gibson Park is under pressure for his position. Does it feel like that?
No, not in the Ireland camp. Not the way Andy Farrell is playing right now. If Schmidt was still head coach, you'd obviously give Murray every chance, even if Gibson Park was playing well. It's just...
That's not writing Murray off. It's just that they've decided this is their guy. They've gone with him. They've backed him. They've picked him every time he's fit. He's got the jersey. He's been in charge whenever we have had our biggest wins in the Farrell era. He's their number one guy.
Yeah, is a suggestion that just Murray is bigger, more physicality, could maybe put a bit more pressure on Dupont in that way. It's not like Gibson Park has let himself down defensively in an Ireland shirt.
No, who's faster? I don't know, but I'd be interested to see who'd win the foot race. But instinct would say it's Gibson Park. Seems faster.
That'd be my instinct as well. I don't know though.
And it's not about being big against Dupont, is it? I've never seen someone smash Dupont and him like crumple up like a cartoon character. He kind of bounces back from that. It's the speed.
You also probably want your back rows doing that as much as anybody else.
100%. Isol, good morning to you. Isol says, as a Spurs and Bengals fan, this week is very confusing. Spurs have taken the mantle as the true disappointment in my life, and the eternal hope I had in them, however irrational, has shifted to the Bengals. Well, the thing about being a Bengals supporter is that you've got like an all-time great quarterback in his second season, it looks like. So like you've got at least a decade, barring injury, and he's already blown his knee out in his first season. But and you've got this unbelievably cocky Alabama kicker who's like, it's going to make this from the halfway line, no problem. We're going to the next big game.
He's great. Also, the news this week that Spurs are trying to get the 2026 Super Bowl has come on stream, so you may have the Bengals playing in the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in 4 years' time.
That would be good. They also announced yesterday there's going to be games in Germany now as well. So
right.
The whole internationalisation of the NFL is happening faster than everybody thought it might. Apart from the fact that maybe we were going to get a team in this part of the world, which might be the one thing that saves the Jaguars from complete insignificance. Peter G says Son's goal being allowed was a joke. Even if it wasn't a foul, Broha clearly had a head injury. Yeah,
like it was a foul as well on. It was a foul as well as the head injury, so it was. It shouldn't have stood, but it didn't matter in the end. Southampton got the rubber green. Justice was done. VAR saved Southampton and justice.
It's like both United and Spurs don't want the fourth spot. Shane says that on our YouTube channel. It's like they're both crap. That might be the truth of this. They could just both be rubbish at the moment. Like, when we were talking about the Man United squad yesterday with Daniel Harris, I pulled it up and was like, how many of these are actually any good of the squad? Like, you're picking them to get in a top 4 team, but the top 4, that's not the metric.
Yeah.
To win the league is the metric. Man City are going to win 5 out of the last 6 is when they win this one. Like, how many of that Manchester United squad are getting into the first team at Manchester City, and how many of them are even making the bench at this stage? Like, any of the midfielders, maybe under Pep, Fred is useful to do something.
That is an important factor in all of this. Like, Pogba under Pep would have been an interesting experiment. I don't think Pep would have signed him.
Never showed any interest in him. Never said that you're the type of thing that I want in my team. Whatever that particular skill set you have, that kind of hybrid between a 6 and an 8 and a really you want to be a 10 but you're not fast enough to do that or whatever. I don't know who you are. I don't think he would have found a role for him, but I don't know if I think he'd be a sub. That'd
be an interesting one to do, actually, rather than just pick your combined 11, pick your combined squad. They obviously wanted Ronaldo before Manchester United swooped in last year, or did they? I was just about to say, or was that just the greatest bluff in recent Premier League transfer history? Like, you look at someone like Bruno Fernandes, who has been Manchester United's best player in this era, and they don't play a player in that position for Manchester City, or if they do, there is a certain luxury to it, and like you have to admit that De Bruyne has nailed the midfield.
Well, I was going to say
a lot better than Bruno Fernandes has nailed the midfield thing, because Fernandes is an amazing number 10. But the number 10 feels like a luxury matter in football, doesn't it? So, like, can he bring the same level of I guess, all-round midfield play that the likes of Gundogan or Bernardo Silva or, as I said, De Bruyne can? I'm not sure he can. And if Pep is picking the team, is he picking him ahead of any of those three? I'm not entirely sure he is, even though his numbers, especially last season, were absolutely incredible. When you talk about Spurs and Tottenham being bad, like, it is the same thing that we've had last season and possibly the season before, is that this is a slow bike race towards the Champions League spots. That I would say that the fixture tonight to watch is not Liverpool versus Leicester City at all. It is very much Wolves at home to Arsenal. They play each other again in a couple of weeks' time as well. I think it's at the end of this month. And, like, Wolves are also in a position where if they win their games in hand, they are in the top 4. They're in 4th place if they win their games in hand. They've got Arsenal as 2 of their games over the next little while. Like, those are massive fixtures. If there are 2 winners from those games and they're the same winner, that team will be in 4th place more than likely.
Okay,
so
Wolves aren't good enough. They're not. Like,
you don't think so?
No.
I mean, the maths show.
Wolves were 2-0 down to Villa with like 3 minutes left to go, and somehow managed to scrape a 3-2 win that ultimately ended up at Dean Smith, ended up at Norwich.
The table lies is what you're saying.
Absolutely, I think. I was looking at Wolves last night when Villa were 3-1 up, going, oh, if only we hadn't lost that game against them. But then, like, we wouldn't have Coutinho and blah blah blah. You know, it's a massive hinge point to see. And then Villa collapsed, obviously. But like, that's how crazy it is. Where if Villa had maintained their lead last night, they'd be looking at Wolves going, we can get you.
Wolves win their 2 games in hand. They're a point ahead of Manchester United. And they're on the same amount of points as West Ham with a game in hand on top of that. Now, they're probably not going to do that.
My granny had balls, she'd be my granddad.
I know that, but, like, I mean, Adrian said that last week when we were doing our quick picks, as in predicting things, being
it's Liam Brady.
I know it is. I know it's Liam Brady.
Well, that's obviously, he wasn't the first either to say it, but you know.
Like, the thing is, like, you're talking about things in the future. Like, I'm not saying if Wolves had won this game in the past, which is where the Liam Brady phrase comes in, and I'm absolutely attributing that to Liam Brady. I don't care who came up with it. We're talking about future predictions here, and of course, I mean, there were an actual bits of analysis that involved.
Okay, get it, yeah.
Wolves
you don't need to explain the bit. Go on.
Wolves are absolutely in the conversation here, especially given Arsenal are 2 of their fixtures. They're not a trustworthy foe. I mean, basically, if you're saying that Wolves aren't good enough.
Surely the Arsenal fans are looking, all we got to do is beat Wolves twice to be in the top 4.
I 100% agree. That should be the way.
If 6 weeks ago somebody had said that, if 8 weeks ago somebody said, all you got to do is beat Wolves twice to be in the top 4, you'd be like, yeah, come on.
Well, I'll tell you what, I was desperately disappointed when that fixture against Wolves was called off on what was it, Stephen's Day, because Arsenal were going very well, and I said they needed another game before playing that Manchester City game on New Year's Day, which was an absolute calamity. So that was the way it was. But things have changed. As you say yourself, new information came to light. That is definitely a Jerry Gilroy invention, not from a movie or anything like that. And that the new information that we have now is that Arsenal are back to being very, very shaky and untrustworthy. So I'm just saying that's the game to watch tonight, because I think it has big significance in the top 4 race.
It won't be as sexy football though
as Liverpool-Leicester.
Wolves are a hard watch.
Yeah, that's what's got them into this position.
Yeah, fair enough. I always thought if football was still played like it was during the 2000s, James Ward-Prowse would be seen as one of the best players in the league. Look at the career Beckham had. Similar skill set, says Peter. James Ward-Prowse was excellent for Southampton last night, says Mark Dunning. Wonder will the likes of United, Spurs, Arsenal make a move from during the summer. He is as good, if not better, than any midfielder at those clubs. Do you remember Schneiderlin signed for Man United? Do you remember that?
That is the thing that happened.
I totally forgot about that until yesterday. It came up on my timeline for something, and I was like, where's he now? What's the story? It was actually, I think it was a piece Mick McCarthy wrote about Everton signing Schneiderlin afterwards, and
that was it.
Their addiction to signing cast-offs from the top six. I was like, that club lost its way. There's one example, but all of the other examples, and that was to round this out. Manchester United are light years away from being a Premier League winning team. They might fluke a run in the Champions League. It's possible because the Champions League is chaos. It is absolutely possible. They've got Atletico, and Atletico are having a disaster at the moment. So it's possible they get through that, and who knows what happens after that, right? But to think that they're going to be able to catch any of the teams ahead of them in the league without a massive systemic overhaul and an identity emerging, which is whatever their identity is going to be for the next decade. It's like there's a very good chance that we're in the middle of the famine at the moment, that it's not as close to ending as it is to starting. That it's actually, it could end up being longer than that between Busby and Ferguson.
It's
already they've spent $1 billion.
It's very hard. They've gotten down this path now, and it was easier to fix 5-6 years ago than it is fixed now. There's no question about that. Like, I do think though, and I know that this is just living in the moment and we won't know for sure, it does feel that the current signings and the current players that they're signing aren't on Morgan Schneiderlin level. I think they actually just got Schneiderlin and Schweinsteiger mixed up. So they're like, we'll take them both, and that's the way they went. But like right now,
Harry Maguire,
Varane. Signing, so surely Raphael Varane will go down as a better signing for Manchester United than
Varane's injury profile is not great.
Doesn't look great, I guess.
Like, yeah, okay, great, fully fit Rafa Varane, playing 42 matches, playing 50 matches a season, which is what you need to do. Great, absolutely good signing. But like, I'm sorry, he's come into it where the agent's like, well, I know how much Harry Maguire's getting paid, so I've got to get paid at least as good as him because I've World Cup winner here. This guy, what's he done? Well, you know what he's done. Who's it going to be? And it's just, it is calamitous how much they're paying players. Like, they're talking about giving Pogba a contract on $500,000 a week. 26 million quid a year for a player they don't know what to do with.
Yeah, that would just be stupid.
That, like, they need not to think about the lost money. Oh, we'll lose Pogba's transfer value if we don't sign him to a new deal. Yeah, but you've got to pay him 26 million a year. That's 100 million over 4 years. You're losing that 100 million. You don't get that back. You're not getting 100 million from after the first season.
But the revenue that he brings in all the other ways, he could do TikToks for you on money.
And you know what? That is, if in doubt, follow the money.
So Sancho, Varane, Ronaldo were their headline signings last summer. It's bad to say that was actually not a bad summer in the recent context of Manchester United. I agree that in time, Ronaldo may look like a bad piece of business. Granted, the transfer fee wasn't all that much. Varane, you think that maybe that won't work out too well. Sancho, very much jury out on that. So you can't say that was a good summer.
Sorry, I don't think you're right. It shows a more joined up thinking, with the exception of the Ronaldo signing. I think
it's not great. Don't get me wrong, but it's. Are we at least seeing baby steps? Well, they need more than baby steps, obviously.
Yeah. But the trouble is, they need about 10 players who are like capable of becoming good players, and they haven't got that.
Yeah.
No, none of the mid to long term signings. Like Daniel James playing well last night.
Yeah. Got £27 million for him.
Let's get rid of him because we definitely don't need pace and ability and.
Like the thing is, the real litmus test is if Donny van de Beek. I think there's a low probability on this, but if Donny van de Beek breaks out at Everton over the next couple of months and plays very good football, then you really have to question everything that's going on at this. There's something patently wrong with Manchester United if somehow you've got Daniel James playing better than he did at the club and Van de Beek playing better than he did at the club, because those are the sorts of signings that you should be looking at and saying, well, we can invest in these players for the future. And they may not be a starter eventually, but they'll eventually work their way into the starting team and they will come good. And if they're not even getting those right, or if those players can't even manage to succeed at the club, then something is wrong. So
Well, it is.
It already is wrong.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say. You don't need Van de Beek to tell them that.
14 minutes past 8 this morning. OTB AM is brought to you live every morning by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. The French still haven't won a trophy, let alone consistently winning trophies over the years. Yes, they're playing great rugby, but to keep insinuating they're one of the great all-time teams is silly, says Ross Galvin. We're not saying they are yet, but we're saying that they do have that potential. Matt Williams was saying the age profile of this team is good enough to take them through the next 2 World Cup cycles. In that period of time, it is undoubted, it's a fact that they are going to win trophies. They should win 3 out of the next six nations. That's how good a group of players they have. The other thing is, and I talked about this before about other things, is the industrialisation of the process. They've got the process right. They have a relationship with the clubs that works and makes sense, and they have an underage structure that makes sense, and they have a style of play that makes sense. So, it's like, at the same time, a group of world-class players have come through in Dupont and Etimac. That might not happen again. They might not get 2 world-class players coming through in every crop. So they're at bat, and let's see how well they do. They should have won last year.
Yeah, like
Wales stole last year's, and fair play to Wales for doing it. Congratulations, we love you.
the story still needs to be written, obviously, on what will happen over the next couple of years. But have France kind of gone about this quite quickly in a lack of fuss manner? Like there is always a fuss attached to France.
I think we didn't pay attention to the fuss, but like there was a lot of sacred cows got slaughtered in public by Laporte, and just do a quick search of Laporte, like arrested at one stage during a load of stuff, and massive rows with the owner of Toulon and all sorts of like stuff going on. You're like, so like the 30 for 30 will be amazing. Yeah,
fair enough. I was about to make a very inaccurate comparison then between that and what we were hearing from Jonathan Hill yesterday, being like, it's actually not that hard. Just go and get it done. Get all the right ideas and get them done.
He had the right idea. I think like they're a bunch of sacred cows. Some of these are going to have to be slaughtered in public, and we'll feast on the meat. We will share out the bounty of the meat of the sacred cow that we kill.
Even the cow's relative will be feasting on it. Like, that's, everybody wins.
A bit of cannibalism for your breakfast this morning at 8:17 from Owen. We've got a packed show still to come on OTB AM. We're going to hear Will O'Callaghan's latest hurling power rankings. Very, very controversially, a bunch of counties didn't even exist. Will from Kings County, was they Kings or Queens? And awfully, I don't know.
Both, probably.
Who cares? We're talking Spurs with John Duggan. There's our Super Bowl preview at Mike Carlson, and we're back after these with the papers.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Newspapers have called it the greatest club game ever.
Munster legends Alan Quinlan and Niamh Briggs are joining forces to bring you all the latest analysis, news, interviews and so much more.
The strength of Munster rugby has always been the big boys up front.
There's a lot of pressure on these guys continuously.
I'm actually really, really excited for it.
The Red 78 with Alan Quinlan and Niamh Briggs. Available every Wednesday. Don't miss a moment of action. Subscribe to the Rugby channel on the OTB Sports app and turn on your notifications now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
And it's an incredible point. Because Kieran Kilkenny is shadowing him. He gets the ball, he's about 45 yards out. He's going down the side and he cuts in nonchalantly and swings it over the bar. In terms of the best David Clifford scores you've ever seen in your life, where does that one rank?
The sickening thing is probably not even in his top 10. Like, he has the ability to do anything. And in fairness to him, like we said about McManus last week, he takes on difficult shots and he takes on responsibility when he's personally under pressure as well. Like, say, after he missed the penalty, he went looking for the ball straight away and got himself on the scoreboard straight away. It's just a mark of such a quality player. And last week as well, we were saying, what do you actually rate in a score? And the timing of a score is actually now my favourite thing. When can you get that score? Because even the mentality to step up and throw that over after, maybe an error or two was just an absolute beaut. But yeah, he scored some outrageous scores. That was up there, but I'd say maybe 11th in his list.
A tough crowd. You were getting grief for saying this. So just in case our radio listeners, what we've just seen is David Clifford kick an outrageous score from the right half forward, right corner forward position with his left foot.
With his left foot.
On the telly, it looked like he's just kicked that into space.
Yeah. Yeah, and
You were
I
at the game.
Yeah, I was, and I tweeted immediately being like, David Clifford is Steph Curry, and tweets stay up for a while. And
What's the comparison?
Because Steph Curry changed how basketball was played in terms of range. It was like, right, there's a guy standing ages away from our from our basket. We've all of a sudden got to make a decision about how to guard this guy. Like, we can't just let him hang out outside there because he can shoot from anywhere. Once he's inside our half, he can shoot from anywhere. And it does come back to what the lads were saying about Conor McManus, that these lads are changing the game ever so slightly, where you can't just defend your scoring zone because the scoring zone doesn't exist anymore. These lads are changing it. But I think Clifford goes one further, and I know that this didn't happen at the weekend. He goes one further insofar as he's doing that with goal scoring as well. Granted, he's missed a couple of opportunities, one against Kildare, one against Cork in 2020, but against Mid-Kerry in the County Championship in 2020, he scores this outrageous goal from 20-something yards, and he is going to start banging those in the green and gold to Kerry soon, I reckon.
He's been doing it since he's 12. The highlights reel is unbelievable.
So that was my point, and then there were people, and it's not people being like anti-Clifford. Of course, you got people out there who are like, oh, he gassed out in the All-Ireland semi-final against Tyrone last year. Oh, I can't wait for him to choke in Croke Park. He scored 8 points in that game.
Didn't he get a serious injury?
Wasn't
he up against one of the best man markers in the country?
Yeah, like I find that argument completely nonsensical. Call Kerry chokers all you want, but I mean, calling Clifford a choker on
incorrect.
Semi-final, I think is incorrect.
Erroneous.
But what you have on the other side of things is also Kerry people being like, oh, he's LeBron. That's a disgrace. I mean, Steph Curry's very content with that comparison. I'm like I was just comparing their scoring ability. Like, would you relax? I don't actually think David Clifford is Steph Curry. For God's sake, would you calm down?
Yeah.
He can score from long range. That was it. The beginning and the end of it.
Well, I mean, I think he might be. I think your comparison is perfectly correct. The people calling him LeBron, that we all know Michael Murphy is LeBron, so
well, that's true.
That has to still be factored into everything here. 21 minutes past 8, OTB AM, brought to you live every morning by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette with your best face forward with the new and improved razors. That was a clip from this week's episode of the Football Pod. That was James O'Donoghue saying that score was only his 11th best. We might get him to run through his top 10 at some point. That might be a good feature for us to do. You can get James' conversation weekly with Tommy and Paddy Andrews on the OTB Sports app. You can also get it wherever you get your podcasts. The best place these days, though, is actually the OTB Sports app. And make sure you hit the automatic download selection, and it'll be ready for you whenever you want it. Let's run through the sports pages very quickly. Atoji could have been captain for 4 years now, says Chris Jones. This is going to be the one big thing that Eddie Jones has screwed up, unless he makes him captain for the World Cup, and this is all making sure that he's ready for that. He was untouchable. He was a talent. Oliver Holt on the career of Wayne Rooney. Chris Hughton officially named as Ghana's technical advisor. They've put together an all-star team. They've got a World Cup playoff against Nigeria very soon, so if that goes well, he'll be at the World Cup as part of that team. Rooney says Chelsea stud story a lot deeper than isolated quotes, and we've done a feature on the best moments that Ireland have had in Paris. So Sexton's drop goal, Drico's hat-trick, and many more. Not many more. That's pretty much it. There's one other one, I think.
Yeah, we did a Classic Game Club actually a couple of years ago on Paris, just before lockdown. I think that would have been the hook for it. What a game. Obviously O'Driscoll was absolutely sensational, and that was like a France team who were just like, yeah, we can have all the flair we want at the back, who cares about what we've got up front.
The halftime analysis was also amazing, because it was like, this young fellow O'Driscoll, not great defensively, but pretty good going forward, and then scores a hat-trick. We were glad we picked him out beforehand. His defence turned out to be pretty good in the end. I'm going to run through the sports page headlines for you. The hurdled hurt Salah in the frame, so Mo Salah back potentially for tonight. United players keen on Pochettino for the job. We should listen to them, because they've done such a great stand-up job. They're such a good bunch of go-ahead, go-getters, thrusting individuals who, have represented everybody very well. Farrell is ready to name unchanged team for France. That is Rory O'Connor and Cian Tracy. And in fairness, Jerry Thorney has the same unchanged team as well. But Henshaw coming onto the bench. Pochettino back in the frame as United ramp up manager hunt. And they also have Dunn determined to end slump after slipping to world number 1,697. So the vagaries of the golf game, everybody's talking about Seamus Power and how well things are going, but there's the other side of that too. Swinging 60s, Pep's incredible points tally as City go 12 clear. They're turning the league into a bit of a bore at the top end. Luckily, everybody else is making it pretty interesting. Gimme more. United players want Poch as boss in summer. You've got to be careful what you wish for. I have to assume that Pochettino's coming in and kicking out those players that Ranić is already identifying as not doing enough. Kevin makes it look so beezy. City sting when they're winning to go 12 points clear. This is the Mirror with the puns. Che Co's Conte, Che Adams, Spurs killer last night at the new White Hart Lane, or the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. What's the London?
Tottenham Hotspur Stadium.
Right. Phil on rampage. So Philippe Coutinho played well last night. The 2 passes for the 2 Ramsey goals were sublime. The 2 Ramsey finishes were also absolutely excellent.
I'll talk about, like, he has to be the emerging star at the end of the season, isn't he, Ramsey?
Yeah. Like, he's obviously it's not just Stephen Gerrard who he'll be getting instructions from. It's Gary McAllister, and like, it's the ability to control a game, be involved, as opposed to just being a finisher. I mean, if he can score goals at the rate that he's scoring goals at the minute, it won't really matter what else he does for any team that he plays for, but it would be great if he could add that extra bit too. So it's not just we've seen players come through early, score a lot of goals as midfielders and not actually be very good midfielders, and then that bit of the game dries up, and who are they? And you kind of, Dele Alli's the obvious one, but doesn't that feel good? City open up healthy lead after swatting aside bees, and we'll play exciting Duff. Is the headline on Paul Lennon's piece. Damien Duff is determined to see his Shelbourne side deliver sexy football this season. I think the game should be played in a certain way. I want a good brand of football. Hopefully dominate games, which is probably unheard of for a first division team coming up. But he's added a lot of talent to them. Front page of the Examiner. Quelle surprise, Ireland's spirit of adventure won't catch us off guard, insists Entamac. We've talked about that. He's saying all the right things.
I think that the French have been capable of saying things in the past that not that they necessarily regret. I just think that they've been quite aloof to what actually gets reported over here and how much they can wind other people up. So maybe there's been a bit of a message into the camp to be like, listen, just be as boring as possible and talk up your opponents, and that's how we're going to play things, because it's a bit of a no-brainer at the moment. I think people can get inspiration from anything. Really good, as usual, column from Tommy Martin in the Examiner this morning. He's talking about has Andy Farrell's Fun Factory set Ireland free, given out about the Mexican wave correctly, saying that there wasn't. Funny thing happened on Ireland's way to victory over Wales around the hour mark, with the benches emptying in the game. If not quite dead, then certainly flopping about on the riverbank. A Mexican wave started, and not just any Mexican wave. This one was long and disturbingly persistent. A Mexican wave is fun in the way a conga line at a wedding is fun, by which I mean oppressive and judgmental, like a Stalinist show trial. There's loads of other good stuff as well. That's not to say the successes under Schmidt were not enjoyable for players and fans alike, but they felt more like frightening displays of martial power, with all the joie de vivre of a Roman legion crushing a provincial revolt. Yeah, it's true. It is true. Like, I know Ronan O'Gara was saying earlier on that that's how people feel after they've won 8 or 9 games. They start reading a lot into it. But we won 8 or 9 games in a row under Schmidt, and like, if you do remember accurately, a lot of people were bored. They were giving out about it being boring. I was like, oh no, the winning culture is going to evolve and it'll get better. And it never got better. It was like, we have a style of play. We will crush you. I must break you. We were even Drago, and then we got caught by the Rockies. I disagree about the boring point. I think that 2018, I don't think many people are bored by winning a Grand Slam. I don't think even if you go back a further year, people are bored by winning a tour in Australia. I certainly don't think people are bored by beating the All Blacks at the end of 2018. Well, the New Zealand game in Chicago was very different. It felt like we were attacking in waves in a way that we hadn't seen before, and we thought it felt a little bit like Ireland at the Euros under Martin O'Neill. It's like, oh, this is how we're going to play from now on. But then we went back to, we're going to have the best set piece in the world, we're going to have the best ruck in the world, we're going to have the best box kicking game in the world, and we're going to beat you 16-9. But after a while, it was unsustainable. I think everybody worked it out. Yeah, that is definitely true. But I think the most boring aspect was the predictability of getting smashed by England in the build-up to the 2019 World Cup, or the predictability of getting beaten by New Zealand in that World Cup. Granted, the Japan defeat was a bit unexpected. That wasn't exactly boring. The defeat to England at the start of 2019 was the first game of the Six Nations, so a lot of people didn't actually, least of all us, actually saw that result coming. So that was unexpected. But after a period of time, it became expected that Ireland were not in a good place, and that was the most boring part. Being a sports fan is very exciting if your team is winning. It can be quite boring and quite dreary if your team is losing all the time. And for me, that was the greatest difference in the excitement levels between the 2 periods in the Schmidt era. What was the difference? One era was full of winning and one era was full of losing. Okay. So
never mind the quality, feel the results.
I definitely feel that was the biggest part. Of course, when you look back at it in the cold light of day.
But there were lots of people giving out about style at that stage, right? It's true that there were other people apart from you who, like, you know, you've been raised on a diet of victory, right?
True.
So there were dissenting voices. There doesn't seem to be anybody saying, "Oh, this is terrible. I can't believe we're like throwing the ball around like it's cheap." It's like, no, it's okay. Let's do this.
Yeah, that is like, does seem that everybody's on board. Yeah,
I do think that there's a world in which Matt Hansen or somebody else throws a horrific intercept try and we get beaten because of it at the weekend, and we're like, "Oh, you can't be doing this. I want to go back to the Conservative game." That's like how this is going to play out, right?
Like it might do. I think that.
What are you doing throwing that pass? It's like you've just thrown.
Who's that person going to be?
Well, the
collective,
the Greek chorus.
Yeah. I think that there's been a good degree of forgiveness for Sexton throwing that ball away in the first half of the weekend, but throwing an intercept try would be an entirely different matter, especially if it ends up in a defeat.
Well, so say Matt Hansen gets skinned for a couple of defensive things because he's the last person back there, and that's like he's going to be left one-on-one with some of the best, fastest players in the world. You know, I definitely think that we're going to rush to scapegoat, and there'll be a bit of a backlash because it's like, oh, you won't win a World Cup playing like that now. Look, we've lost this game, as opposed to, well, we need to get this right and keep going.
We are early in a cycle, and there are still kinks to be ironed out.
Exactly. If you want to be at the game, though, you've got like about half an hour left to enter our competition this morning. It's a very special competition for you. We're giving you another chance to enter. AerLingus is the official airline sponsor of the Irish rugby team, bringing home advantage to wherever the team plays. And to celebrate, we have an amazing prize of a pair of match tickets, flights and 2 nights accommodation to be won for this weekend's Six Nations clash between France and Ireland in Paris, as well as a signed Irish rugby jersey. Today's daily winner will win an Ireland rugby jersey and be with the draw, and to be in our draw at 9:25 for the amazing overall prize. To enter, tell us who our mystery voice is.
To say that's unfair is just ridiculous, and you shouldn't be asking those questions.
Oh, we're going to keep asking them, though.
To say that's unfair is just ridiculous, and you shouldn't be asking those questions.
To enter, you can WhatsApp us 0879 180 180. You can tweet us at Off The Ball, or you can comment on our YouTube channel. This morning, our daily winner will be announced before 9 a.m. They'll win an Irish rugby jersey and go into the draw at 9:25 for the grand prize. Now, Will O'Callaghan is with us at 8:32. Will, how are you?
I'm trying to work out, lads, whether that's the actual footage from that rugby head coach or whether that's a Richie McCormick impression of him. I'm not quite sure.
Oh no, that's the real one. We have a sting for this. I didn't. Apologies. Here we go.
Some of these critics, these pundits. I absolutely adore them lads. I have unbelievable time for them, but they're a great bunch. But it's not acceptable.
They'd like to play the hard man when they're on it. It's not very pleasant when you're trying to manage a team. All you're looking for is a bit of civility and a bit of decency, but they just miss you like you know, you have nothing to do with the bloody occasion.
If Richie's impression is that good, we need to get him doing stuff with it. That's like, our opportunities are endless. Think of the crank calls.
Yeah, no, he can do that particular head coach really, really well. I think it's probably in his top 3 or 4 impressions he can do.
Oh, Maro, we've decided to make you captain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm sorry about all those things I wrote about you in my book. It was really bad. I was, you know, I shouldn't really have been writing a cash-in book in the middle of my time here. I should really wait, like everybody else does, to do it at the end, and then I can do my book tour.
Yeah, like Joe Schmidt writing a book during the World Cup, essentially.
Will, good morning to you.
Morning, lad.
I just want to, you know, it's important that we all recognise when we make mistakes and we grow and we change as an organisation and a group, and particularly as an individual, that you have learned that Ireland is actually 32 counties on the island thing, that there's more than just this mythical barrier that you had erected. I do believe that, you know, sometimes people in the Midlands, there's that post-colonial hangover, which is even more than it is for the rest of us, because you guys were infested with the planters. We know that, like, you know, and there's probably a little bit of planter blood in all of you, so it's fine. I get that you kind of have that umbilical link all the way back to our colonial past, and sometimes you can't throw off those shackles. You're just an agent of the state, whatever the state may be. In this case, it was like the hurling superpowers, but you've grown. There are more than 12 counties in Ireland.
Yeah, we're up to 24 on the new list. It almost sounds like an appropriate metaphor for the development of hurling, where it has been forgotten in so many counties.
You are right.
with the exception of a few hamlets in Ulster where hurling is promoted incredibly strongly, like in Antrim, and then they don't even get a slot on League Sunday last week when they played away from home against Kilkenny. And then, the sport has been slow to grow, and I think that is on everybody within Gaelic games that hurling has not been pushed strongly enough, particularly, say, north of Mullingar, with the exception of some of the counties in Ulster. And I would say, with the exception of Galway, in Connacht, it's not been pushed strongly enough traditionally in Connacht either. So we're happy enough to have, say, 8 or 9 teams who are contesting at a really high level. But we have, as you say, corrected the power rankings to include teams from the Lory Maher and the Christy Ring this week, and we will be updating these as we go through the summer. It's one of those things as well. I think the most abuse that probably came in last week was obviously around Galway, including, like, one guy tweeted me at 3:30 in the morning on a Saturday, just like not even linked to anything with the
power rankings. So high-profile paper.
Yeah, it was like, clown, how can you put Galway into 9th place? I think I just replied and went, just look at the rankings and you'll see why I explained it. But the other one that we got, obviously, in the YouTube comments were, look, you got to go further than just the top 12. So we have corrected that mistake. Excellent. And now we've got 24.
Okay, so we're starting with 24 to 16.
Yeah, so you're looking at the teams who potentially towards the bottom of this are those who are going to be competing hopefully later this year to try and win the Lory Maher, and you've got some teams towards the bottom of the Christy Ring. So just to run through this pretty quickly, you've got Donegal and Mayo in 24th and 23rd respectively. You've got Roscommon, who went down last year into the Lory Maher from the Christy Ring. And then you've got Sligo, who got to the quarterfinals of the Christy Ring last year, as well as Wicklow. Above them, the beaten Christy Ring finalists of last year, who are Derry, who were in 19th. And then the placing for 18th and 17th was decided somewhat by their opening round game in Division 2A of the Hurling League last weekend, where Meath got the better of Kildare. Albeit Kildare will have their Naas players coming back in after winning the All-Ireland last weekend. But at the moment, I think Meath are just ahead of Kildare, and that's your 17 to 24 on the list.
I mean, I do think that those Naas players will have an impact. But look, I understand Tommy got you, and that's fair enough. We'll keep going, Will. Don't worry. We'll come back to that.
Right, okay, so we go along to the top 16 then when we look at the next round of teams. So we're going towards the top end of the Christy Ring here. Perhaps the biggest surprise on this one is Carlow being down in 16th currently. This is a Carlow team who 3 years ago were getting loads of pats on the back after they got a draw against Galway, and people were thinking that maybe they might actually go ahead of their neighbours in Laois and become the next best team outside the top sides in Leinster. But they've had a little bit of a fall over the last couple of years, didn't get to the final of the Joe McDonagh last season, and opened up their campaign in Division 2A of the Hurling League, losing out to the team who were just above them in 15th in Down last week. The unsavoury fallout from that game as well, with accusations around sectarian language possibly being used on the pitch as well. But that was a great start for Down in Division 2A. Down coming off the back of winning the Christy Ring 2 seasons ago, and now trying to become an established team both in 2A and in the Joe McDonagh. So I've got them ahead of Carlow. Kerry, who started off disappointingly last weekend, losing out away from home against Westmeath, one of their rivals for promotion from Division 2A, come in 14th place. They lost the Joe McDonagh Cup final last year, but obviously had an interesting start to pre-season when they beat Tipperary for the first time. And they'll feel, Stephen Malumphey's side, that they can bounce back from that defeat last weekend. Carlow this weekend have got Westmeath at home, and you would think if Westmeath win that game going into the 1 week break, Westmeath would actually be really well set up to top that division. And we'll see if Kerry can bounce back this weekend. I've put Offaly in, the Christy Ring winners from last year, into 13th place. They beat Kerry last year in league, and they finished the league unbeaten, albeit they started the campaign last weekend with a very poor defeat against Galway. With the manner of the defeat, they conceded 4-22 and coughed up a series of other goal chances during the game. It could have been even more of a beating than the double scores defeat that they took. But Offaly are unlikely to win any games in Division 1A of the Hurling League. They've got Cork at home in Birr this coming weekend, which is a difficult start against the Cork team who really opened up against Clare last week. But realistically, you go back over the last 6 seasons since there was a slight streamlining of the league, only 6 wins for the teams who come up from Division 2A the season before across those 6 years. So it trends at 1 a season. And with Offaly's very difficult group there, with a couple of recent All-Ireland champions in Division 1A, they're unlikely to win a game. But I think they go into the Joe McDonagh with a serious chance of getting to the final, despite the fact they were playing in the Christy Ring last year. So as a result, they're in 13th.
All joking aside, by doing what you did with just the 12 teams in the rankings last week, you kind of said the quiet bit out loud, is that there isn't enough investment, that there isn't enough care given to these counties. That stat that you have is actually really damning of the hurling authorities, who constantly tell us about how great their championship is because everybody gets games at their own level. But what's supposed to follow that is an analysis of why they're not able to make the leap and what the level of funding required to make the leap would be. But instead, what we see is like, sure, no one really cares about this. And I think that conversations like this help expose that.
Yeah, look, it feels a little bit like a revolving door, because what tends to happen is, particularly now that the Leinster Senior Hurling Championship is de facto a development division towards the bottom, so the team who wins the Joe McDonagh Cup is going to go into the Leinster Championship for next year. And then what tends to happen is the team who gets relegated from the Leinster round robin series will drop back into the Joe McDonagh, will become the favourites to win that competition, will almost certainly come back up within the year or the following year. They tend to be the teams that are at the bottom of Division 1 and at the top of Division 2. So it becomes very difficult to claw your way up into Division 1 hurling to consistently get to play it. Now, Laois may be the exception. For the last 10 years, they've played in Division 1, but they've had to play in relegation playoffs in many of those years over the last 10 as well. So there's a definite feeling that the big teams get to play against each other. That's preparation time for the championship. And then the only real aspiration you've got, if you're slightly below that, is to draw yourself into a group where maybe you get to play against each other. So whether that be Laois, Antrim, Kerry, Offaly, Carlow over the next few years. And that has been just the case for the last 5 or 6. And this new kind of reformed league over the last few years, where particularly you've got one very strong group with the way it's set up, just sets up the Division 2 champions to be cannon fodder. We saw that with Westmeath last season as well, where they lost all their games and lost some of them quite heavily. Now, for Westmeath, it still meant they were at a better standard going into the Joe McDonagh, but there is a definite feeling that there's a gap that's incredibly hard to try and make up for the team who come up from Division 2.
I wonder what is being done. Like, what is the level of investment in strength and conditioning? What is the level of investment in schools coaching? What is the level of investment in development squads? And who should be footing the bill for that? It should be centrally, really. It's like we've identified these counties. There are enough people on the ground trying to help. We've seen that they can't get beyond this. There's a logjam there. What's that logjam? It has to be investment. And if there's no investment, fair enough, you've just decided that you don't really want those, and it is actually we should just concentrate on the 12 teams.
Yeah, well, look, structurally the counties have to help themselves as well, and there has to be a will within the counties, particularly when we look at them slightly further down the totem pole, to actually try and kick hurling on as well. Like, it's no coincidence that when you go outside the top 16 particularly, you are looking at teams who are predominantly football counties and probably quite successful at football as well. So it's about having that balance, and that's not to say that some of these counties haven't made big efforts. And look, the GA have brought in things like hurling directors, and they've had people from stronger counties go to try and help out with coaching within those who are developing, and there is a reasonable amount of funding which is made available. The problem is that in this arms race, you're looking at the Munster teams and then, say, Kilkenny and Galway particularly, who are just so far ahead from a starting position. It's incredibly difficult to try and get up to that standard.
All right, let's move on. So the controversial here starts at 9 is Galway. So 12 Westmeath, 11 Antrim, 10 Laois, 9 Galway.
Yeah, so Westmeath won last week against Kerry, which is a good start for them. They won the Keogh Cup. I think they're probably still just behind Antrim, who put in a very credible performance against Kilkenny by all reports, because we didn't have TV cameras to show the game against Antrim and Kilkenny. I wonder how that would have felt if Antrim had actually pulled off a shock last weekend and had beaten Kilkenny. But I think Antrim, as a result, have to be just ahead of Westmeath in that one. Laois lost to Tipperary, who we'll talk about when we get into the top 8. But Laois hurled very well, despite the fact that they played a lot in the second half with 14 men. So again, I don't think they've lost anything from defeat in that. And then I've kept Galway in 9th position, despite the fact that they had a double digits victory against Offaly last weekend to kick off things for Henry Shefflin. I will know a lot more about Galway, and Galway could potentially climb if they can beat a Limerick team, maybe sniff a little bit of blood in the water this coming weekend. And if Galway get a victory, I've no doubt they're going into the top 8 at that point. But I don't think
that's not how this works. They're catapulted up, like they're number 2 or something if they beat Limerick, right? I mean, come on, you can't be like, you need to show me something, Galway. You need to show me, you've just beaten the All-Ireland champions, greatest team of all time. I'm not seeing enough from you, lads. I just need a little bit more.
Well, look, spoilers here, you're not seeing Wexford go up into second place, despite the fact that they beat Limerick last week. But Galway will move up naturally enough if they get a result against Limerick this coming weekend. I think Galway, you can't really put them into the top 8 on the back of beating the weakest team in Division 1 last week. So
okay, fair enough. Okay, so RIP your mentions again. Onto the page 1.
All right, so Clare are on the fall here. They're the team who've gone down a couple of places because a mix of factors, really. They defended so loosely at Páirc Uí Chaoimh against Cork last weekend. It was while Cork, this is what happens. You can't give Cork's forward line space or allow them a game which is open, because if it goes into Harlem Globetrotters style up and down hurling, Cork will beat most teams in the league and championship this year. So Clare need to tighten that up. And then they've also lost Colin Galvin, one of the best midfielders around in the championship. Unfortunately, he's had to retire. So we've lost two really great players over the last week, with Pádraig Maher in Tipperary and Colin Galvin with Clare. So they've slipped down to 8th place, ahead of playing the team who are up to 7th in Wexford this weekend. So it's a really important game in Division 1B this weekend, is in Division 1A, which is Wexford against Clare. Wexford go up to 7th on the back of beating the All-Ireland champions Limerick. Don't overplay this too much, because we remember Limerick last year didn't win in any of their first 3 games in the league and still went on to clean up when championship came around in the summer. But you have to respect what Wexford did last week, particularly with Rory O'Connor not being available with his hamstring injury, Lee Chin not being there. One of the real question marks about Wexford were whether they could dominate games around the middle of the field if Lee Chin wasn't available. Well, they showed they could last week. They tied up Aaron Gillan. He didn't score from play last weekend for Limerick. And maybe it starts to ask a few questions about Limerick's depth, particularly when they don't have Cian Lynch available. Now, again, he's concentrating on the Fitzgibbon currently, and when he comes back in, he'll add dynamism into their midfield. But they lacked some, let's say, creativity within what they were doing from midfield. There was a lot of lateral passing from Limerick last week at Wexford Park, and Wexford got out by a goal. So as a result, they have to go up to 7th. I've put Dublin up to 6th, not just purely based on the Waterford result, which was a good one for them last week to rook it out against a Waterford team who were going into this power rankings in 2nd place. Very credible draw for Dublin. Also won the Walsh Cup in pre-season. Have looked good so far this year. The only doubt about Dublin is, are they going in a bit strong at the start of the year? Like, this is a team that seems to be coming in full pelt, Matty Kenny's side, for the start of the league. Where are they going to be when the round robin comes around for the Leinster Championship? And I still think the one real question mark you've got about Dublin is they don't have an inside forward that compares with what's available for the teams inside the top 5. Like, what they wouldn't give for Conor Callaghan becoming disinterested in football and going to play hurling for a few years.
Call, isn't it? It's worth a call.
I genuinely think if you're Matty Kenny and you already know Con as well as he does from club level, just try and convince him and say, look, Dublin are in transition in football.
Do you know what you do?
You've already got everything from the football.
You say, look, I'll let you play both. You can play both. You can. We'll cut our training whatever way you want it. You can play both for me if you want. And then you go and have that conversation. You see what Desi says.
Well, we know what Desi's going to say to that.
What's he going to say?
No.
Well, then he's a hurler.
Then he's a footballer.
Well, I don't know. Maybe not. You know,
it's 100% worth a call. And like, what would, how transformative would that be? Well, like, I mean, Tommy Walsh said he's one of the top 10 hurlers in the country.
I think he said he was the best. He was like doing a power ranking at that time of the year. It was off season, no split season at that point, but it was certainly.
Tommy said Con was number 1. Yeah,
Cooler were on the run, and he was like, we were like, who's number 1? Conor Callaghan. What?
Look, I remember how impressive Conor Callaghan was when he was playing under 21 with Dublin, and obviously we've seen what he's done with Coola over the last 4 or 5 years. It's still very much untested though until you see him play senior intercounty hurling. It could be a totally different beast. It's not necessarily a case of somebody who is a massive star at club level is going to step straight in, but obviously Con has got all the conditioning with the football. He's an elite athlete. I would, just as a hurling fan, love to see it for a year or two, because Dublin have got a lot right further back in the field, got a good free taker. It's almost like all the ingredients are there, with the exception of having an inside forward who could really take him to the next level. And Conor Callaghan could well be that player if they were looking at who's available within the county.
The Leinster Championship is suddenly looking a bit lit.
It looks a bit better than it did coming out of last year, because we had a few very tame games and we had an underperforming Galway team. We had Wexford looking nowhere like what they were in the 2 years previously. But then Wexford have started the league well. We'll judge an awful lot more about what happens in Ennis this coming weekend. Then we've got 2 teams just above them who I was tempted to drop, but have kept them just provisionally in 5th and 4th, because they won scratchy but won last weekend, which is Tipperary in 5th place. This is a new look Tipperary who actually moved the ball around pretty well against Laois, but never really pulled away in the game. They missed the penalty as well, which could have given them a bit of a lead in the first half. Felt like they never really shook off Laois, but still got the win in the end in O'Moore Park. And Kilkenny, who got their victory, which is very workmanlike, against Antrim. So Tip and Kilkenny stay in 5th and 4th place respectively. Obviously a huge blow since we spoke last in the power rankings, with Pádraig Maher being forced to retire for Tipperary. He's one of those players I think who would have eased the transition for Colin Bonner's side and would still have been a key player for them this season, but they're going to go in a different direction, and it looks like it's going to be opportunity for some of the players who were sitting on the bench for the Premier over the last couple of years.
All right.
Top 3?
Yeah.
Right, so Waterford dropped down one place despite the fact that they drew against Dublin last week. Obviously, they're still waiting for some of their players to come back in, like Desi Hutchinson will be back in after Ballygunner's final against Ballyhale this coming weekend. And I think, a bit like we talk about Conor Callaghan, Desi Hutchinson's just so good at stretching play for Waterford when he goes into that forward line, which is reasonably stacked already. It's not a whole lot between Waterford and Cork, but I think I respect what Cork did last week against Clare. Very good performance from them. You would expect they'll go 2 from 2 this weekend and probably run up a good scoreline as well. So Cork just edge ahead of Waterford as a result of the 2 games last weekend primarily.
I think the real one is Limerick top, and then I actually have Tip and Galway pretty close in a tier below them. I just need to see it from both Waterford and from Cork. I think that Cork will be traumatised by what happened last year. I don't think they're going to be able to blink that away. And so that's what
Cork are guaranteed to be better than last year, aren't they, in terms of quality? Granted, the way they lost the final might scar them, but they're the one team, when you look at the age of the players, they're going to get better this year, no?
Well, I don't know. I mean, their most important players is the same age as a bunch of players who've recently retired.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah, well, like, I mean, obviously, but like Horgan's still there at least.
He is still there.
He is not in the cohort of players who retired.
So diminished, but right.
Look, I think Cork still have to find a few key positions on the team. I think they need to work out who's going to hurl, particularly in their half back line. I think they need to get a settled 6 who's going to be a defensive 6 to play there. Like, that's what we saw in the All-Ireland final against Limerick. Limerick were able to take apart the deficiencies within the Cork defence, and Cork have got all that skill further up the field like we saw last weekend. So look, they're probably not going to stay second for the entire year, but it's where you put them after the results from last weekend. And like, there was no real temptation to drop Limerick despite the defeat against Wexford last week. I'm sure John Kiley will look at the amount of wides that they hit. They'll look at the fact that, you know, Cian Lynch wasn't there in the middle of the field, and he will look at the slow start last year and say they're trying to peak for Munster Championship. With everything Limerick have done over the last 4 seasons or so, they still stay number 1.
One last thing we need to talk about before we go. I know I was slagging off people from the Midlands at the start of this, but that was all in good clean fun. I guess the people in the Midlands must be very proud, and it feels a bit weird to be proud of a company, but what Glenisk have done in becoming the sponsors of Offaly at this particular moment when the factory burned down last year, and it looked like production was going to stop, and there was loads of cows that weren't going to be able to be milked, and it was like a kind of, it required a local community effort to help this massive global corporation, and it was kind of a reminder to all of us that like everything is interlinked, and that company wouldn't be the massive success it is without the people of the Midlands in particular. And they're now showing support for the GAA in Offaly at a particular moment when Offaly GAA seems to be on the rise, but really needs the injection of money that's going to come from this too. And the jersey looks pretty sweet, Will.
That's not bad. This is literally hot off the presses. So Ger Cleary from Glenisk, who was one of those people getting the company back up on their feet after the terrible fire from last year, has put up the new Offaly jersey. I'm assuming it has probably been delivered to Glenisk before anyone else gets a chance to publicise it. So it's the end of Carl's being the Offaly sponsor since the early 90s. It was the longest running one in GA history at 31 years for Intercounty. But Glenisk now in the front of a new Offaly jersey, which looks pretty streamlined and clean. If you're a Glen Swilly supporter or a Credit supporter, this is probably the template you're going to get from O'Neill's next season when you get your club jersey. But I actually really like the new Offaly shirts, and as you say, fantastic for Glenisk, who very quickly after that fire were straight out to get their milk products back out onto the shelves. They got their yogurts, the first batch went about a week ago, and they announced at the same time that they were going to be sponsors of the Offaly football and hurling teams all the way along. It hasn't been a great start with Offaly's results both in football and hurling, but still they're competing in Division 1 and Division 2 for next season, and they're also the All-Ireland reigning under-20 champions, so it's not a bad time I think for Glenisk to come on as sponsors of the Offaly team. They've been big supporters locally. They support their local teams in Clodagh Gales and in Killeen Killorn currently, and they've been big sponsors of Offaly Camogie over the last while, so there's a strong connection between sport and Glenisk as well.
Yeah, a properly innovative company as well, who are doing good work and now putting their money where their mouth is as well, and they make tasty yogurt, so it's a winner chicken dinner for the
And just to give them credit as well, Ger, when the fire happened, they continued to pay their staff. Like, it would have been very easy for them when they were hit so hard at the time to just say, we're going to temporarily lay off people, we'll get back on our feet, but they continued to pay people even when they weren't producing product at the time.
All right, that's this week's Power Rankings.
I absolutely adore them lads. I have unbelievable time for them, but they're a great bunch, but it's not acceptable.
Yeah, that is this week's official hurling power rankings. Am I doing one last opportunity to enter our... one final opportunity to enter our competition. All this week we're running a special competition. AerLingus is the official airline sponsor of the Irish rugby team, bringing home advantage to wherever the team plays. And to celebrate, we have an amazing prize. We're giving away a pair of match tickets, flights and 2 nights accommodation to be won for this weekend's Six Nations clash between France and Ireland in Paris, as well as a signed Irish rugby jersey. The daily winner will pick up a prize of an Ireland rugby jersey, and we'll go into the draw for the overall prize at 9.25. Who's this?
To say that's unfair is just ridiculous, and you shouldn't be asking those questions.
One last time.
To say that's unfair is just ridiculous, and you shouldn't be asking those questions.
Enter on any of our platforms, and we'll be making the draw in the next 5 minutes. So that is officially your last chance to enter, all courtesy of AerLingus, official airline sponsor of the Irish rugby team. John Duggan is with us at 8:54 this morning. John, how are you?
Jaron Owen, how are you getting on?
I didn't even need to look up the score when I saw your tweet. I hate VAR. I was watching the Villa game. I was like, something bad's happened to Spurs.
Stephen Bergwijn putting the ball into the net in stoppage time, and unfortunately, unlike the Leicester game, this one did not stand. And
you were already celebrating?
I was.
Or have you learned not to celebrate?
Well, after the Manchester City game, which actually turned out positively, when I was in the IGO Inn in Ballybrack a couple of years ago, completely in devastation when Raheem Sterling, no, it was Aguero, was it, that put it in? And then it was ruled out, and then you're kind of, you didn't know what to feel, even though you've been qualified for the next round of the Champions League. But I was so annoyed anyway. The metaphorical television had got out the bedroom window by that stage after the 2-1 scoreline was flipped on its head. There's only 2 things I really want to do, experiences-wise. Throw a TV out the window of a Las Vegas hotel. Now, I wouldn't do it because I'd probably get arrested for criminal damage, and also be in a motorcade. They're the 2 things I want to do.
Right, so you need to become president of the United States of America, or just a rock band would do, wouldn't it?
Or maybe just, I don't know if there's any All-Ireland team, even just be on the All-Ireland bus or something like that.
Does like being in a St. Patrick's Day parade float count? If you got a float to yourself?
If they made you the Grand Marshal.
Made you the Grand Marshal?
How'd you become the Grand Marshal?
I don't know, they might not have one for this year, John. It's back on. Can you apply?
Do you have one of those kind of, I don't know, long sticks you twist up and down?
Shillelagh.
Tipping Luke List is probably worthy of becoming Grand Marshal, is it not?
Yeah.
Well, that's yesterday's news, and the Phoenix Open does start today, and that's an opportunity for me to plug Virtual Insanity. But I've always loved the motorcades that go by, like with all the dignitaries and the flags and the cars, and the way that you're standing at the bus stop and you just get drenched by the mud of the car, that limousine. I want to be in that limousine with the windows blacked out.
Does the Pope still have the Pope Mobile? That'd be a nice one.
I think they ended up in the Wax Museum, didn't it?
Did it? Nice. I'm just thinking. I think that would be the way that you could travel in a motorcade. Would be via Pope Mobile to be able to stand up.
Did they get the Pope Mobile after he got shot, or was he shot through the Pope Mobile, or is that?
I thought it was for like just for good kind of posture. You just sitting down all day, and he's like, I need to stand up while I'm doing these motorcades.
I mean, it's tough. It must be tough work.
It is. I mean,
that's why they all live so long.
Mm-hmm. There's 2 popes alive now.
You don't have a motorcade thing, guys, do you? You don't have a...
No, he's not a pope anymore.
Once a pope, always a pope.
No, I don't think so.
No?
I think that, did they not boot him out?
That was certainly the plot of the 2 popes, but...
blind eyes turned, the people are like, can't be turning blind eyes, because that's kind of...
Yeah, well, but I think that was kind of more a reflection on his job as a pope, wasn't
it? I lost... season 2 lost me. Where are we going?
Well, 15 goals scored in 4 games last night, lads. So Manchester City 2-0 winners over Brentford, 13 wins out of 14, 12 points clear. Liverpool have the chance to cut that gap. If they beat Leicester tonight, you'd expect that they might, given the way Brendan Rodgers' side have begun to tank. Wolves against Arsenal this evening, and also last night, as you said, Villa 3, Leeds 3, Coutinho with a goal and 2 assists for Jacob Ramsey, who got the other goals. But Villa still have work to do defensively if Leeds are scoring 3 times. And we had Adam Ida setting up Taimo Pukki for a goal after 39 seconds for Norwich against Palace. That was a 1-1 draw. Wilf Zaha equalising and then scuffing a penalty wide. And then, as I said, Spurs 2, Southampton 3. Hassan Hüttl said it was the best he ever saw Southampton play, which was some statement really to make. 23 shots, 10 on target against a Tottenham team that were, at times, desperately shambolic defensively. Like Ward-Prowse twice put magic balls in for headers and they scored from both of them after being 2-1 down. So there's no excuse for that, really, as good as Ward-Prowse is with a dead ball situation. So Conte's got work to do.
He's 27. Has his move window closed?
I don't think so. I think like Pierre-Emile Højbjerg struggled last night, and Prowse and Ward-Prowse and Romeo have been very much when they're playing for Southampton. They're solid in that middle, and I would be like a club like Newcastle, for example, could do with Ward-Prowse. I think at the moment.
Yeah, okay. That's when you think about it. Sorry, they are the answer to everything really when it comes to this, isn't it? Transfer Market says his value is 28.8 million, but it's not. Like, he's an English player, so therefore you have to spend 50 million to get him, right? Oh, he's a 50 million player.
Is he an English player though?
He is.
He's obviously English, but is he an England player?
9 caps, 2 goals.
Yes. Does he get selected for Qatar? He didn't even get selected in Nathan's top 10 outside the top 10 last week.
He's a fringe player, but
I think that if he goes to Newcastle and Newcastle sign like whoever the next Vlahovic is, say they get Lewandowski because he's like, I'll take $1 million a week. Of course I will.
You want someone to put the ball on the top of his head?
Yeah.
Kieran Trippier can do it.
Trippier and Ward-Prowse. Why not selecting for England? They're doing so well.
Yeah. I mean, like there's been.
It was quite a lock, stock, and 2 smoking barrels there.
It's supposed to be cookie cutter, random England fan, coked up.
Is this different to the hype from James Ward-Prowse a couple of years ago?
Visions of McDonald's in Russia where all the England fans are congregating.
Yeah.
Ahead of one of the games. They're all at McDonald's.
Good times.
With all the flags laid out in front of it.
It's the only language they can speak, right?
I mean, that's the sort of conquest that we're after at the moment, John, with our 2028 bid with England. Maybe if we get the FAI dignitaries to go to that same McDonald's and lay the tricolour outside the front, the bid will come home for 2028 and Russia's bid will die.
Yeah, no, we'll be okay, I think. I think there's been enough indications from UEFA that is a done deal, that we'll get that 2028 Euros. Although it might be only at the Aviva Stadium if it's just 24 teams, which is interesting. Andy Farrell set to name the same 15 that played against Wales for the game against France on Saturday. So it means Ian Henderson and Robbie Henshaw will not start if you believe everything you read. Is that right? Who knows? Like Henderson, could he add more physicality to the second row? Is Henshaw one of our best players anyway and on fitness? But then it gets hard, like Jeff Hurst would give you an example, it's hard to drop a winning team. So we're going to get that team dropping shortly. Jack Gower, great performance from him, 12th overall in the Alpine combined skiing at the Winter Olympics in Beijing. Seamus Power and Graham McDowell are in the Phoenix Open on the PGA Tour later. Jonathan Caldwell, level par opener at the Ral Al Khaimah Classic. That is 7 shots behind the leader, Ricardo Ueva. And racing is a bit later today, a 1:45 start at Thurles. Maybe we're getting a bit of stretch in the evenings. That jumps meeting is on a little bit later than normal. So that's what's kind of going on, lads. I was looking through the Spurs team that played in its best ever season, 2016-17. Alderweireld and Vertonghen, you really miss those two. And that they were the fulcrum of that team.
Conte was singing the praises of the centre-back who just came back into the team after...
Romero, yeah.
Yeah. He said he was like a new signing. He's exactly the type of player I want.
But then if you've got Davies, who's been there a long time, and if you've got Sanchez beside him, and if you've got a midfield that's quite porous, there's not much Christian Romero could do.
You feel pretty deflated after last night, it sounds like.
Well, like I'm always, as I said before in this lot, I'm the most emotional Tottenham Hotspur fan. So, like, we beat another club at the weekend. I'll be, like, doing, singing in the rain dances. So, look... there's levels of disappointment. It's a cross and bearing for 36 years now. So, but it's just levels of disappointment and deflation, and you're always going to be that level of being let down. But at this morning, I'm kind of feeling like I just had the visions of Antonio Conte just like throwing his keys on the table and just walking out the door.
I don't, though. I actually think that the 2 kids that they got in from Juventus was really important because it was a sign that they're backing him and his vision. And like, look, Everton signed some players at the end for Rafa, and they got rid of Luca Dean, so who knows, but it did feel like they were like, okay then, grand, go on, have these.
This is the pep talk you're giving me as a Spurs fan. I appreciate that.
I think there's a chance,
Yeah, I think there's a chance if they could strengthen in the summer, but I suppose Spurs will be the biggest steal of all time if they get 4th, and because everybody else is messing up around them, that is still a possibility, and that, I suppose, is why there's a little bit of frustration that we threw away a 2-1 lead with 12 minutes to go.
A 6-pointer against Wolves at the weekend, and then Manchester City. Big couple of games for Conte.
Yeah, Bruno Lage doing a great job there, and look, Harry Kane's playing well again, and it's just a case of seeing improvements now over the next while. The funny thing is, like, Spurs are in the 5th round of the Cup against Middlesbrough away, but I wouldn't have any confidence that Spurs could beat Liverpool, Manchester City or Chelsea at the moment. And that's how far the top 3 are from the rest.
Even in a one-off game in the Cup?
No. At the moment, like we saw with the League Cup semi-final, Spurs are absolutely so far off it at Stamford Bridge against Chelsea, and even at home.
Yeah. It's true at the moment, but then that could be 2 months away. Son and Kane could be in good form.
Nothing would please me more than to go to an FA Cup final. I've never been to one. It's been 31 years since Spurs were in one. I would love it, Kevin Keegan style. I would love to be there. And I've even thought about it now. I mean, I'm even putting it in the bucket list, but not sure.
Travelling a cavalcade, Spurs in the Cup final, and throw a TV out the window in Vegas. Yeah. I think you could probably organise all 3 of those.
Oh well, by the end of the year, hopefully. Because I'm planning to go to Las Vegas in November, so for 3 days, which is probably 3 too many.
Have you been before?
Who is your call if you get arrested? Do you have an American attorney ready to go?
That's it, Lionel Hutz. Probably my sister.
No, you can't ring a family member from Vegas and say, I've thrown TV at the window. You can't do that. Here, I'm in jail in Vegas. What can I do?
Yeah. Probably somebody from an Irish bar that I've met, or the proprietor of some Irish bar or Irish hotel. I come in Irish Blarney spirit. Look, we're all countrymen here. Just got a bit of spot of bother here. Got a bit carried away. Lost a few blackjack hands. Was actually watching Spurs in the TV room, and I was kind of actually took the TV and threw it out the window.
Do you think that it would be enough of a story to make a Netflix documentary, or do you think it'll just stop at Daily Mail headline where Irishman goes to Vegas with premeditated move to throw television out of window, follows through?
Well, generally it's the rock star's behaviour, but unfortunately can't play any guitars or basses or anything like that. So it's probably going to more make the Irish Daily Star, the Sun, rather than the Mail. But don't think I'd be able to stretch beyond maybe an hour for Netflix, Owen. But unlike you, Owen, because your travels around the world, starting in Wales. Like, you could have done an hour on Wales last week. I'm sure there's many more to come.
I might go to Vegas with you, John.
Yeah, well, if Virtual Insanity does go very well,
That's it. If you double our money this year, Virtual Insanity, I'll spend all that winnings on Vegas.
And you can bring me to basketball. And what I'll do is I'll turn up for the last 5 minutes, because as we know, as I always say to you on the show, the only thing that matters in basketball is the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, shame there's no team.
It's 9:05 here on OTB AM. I'm going to inject some seriousness to proceedings. OTB AM brought to you every morning live by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. We'd love to hear from you. 087 9 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. We're going to talk Super Bowl with Mike Carlson. If you need a cheat sheet, or if you have strong feelings one way or another, then we'd love to hear from you. It is time for us to announce our daily winner of our brilliant AerLingus competition. So daily prizes of an Ireland jersey. The overall prize, which our daily winners are going to go into, is a trip to Paris this weekend. Flights, accommodation, match tickets, and the opportunity to see France duff Ireland, Ireland beat France, whatever it is. It's going to be a classic. Our winners, today's voice.
Say that's unfair is just ridiculous, and you shouldn't be asking those questions.
Who's that, Owen? Who's that very annoyed?
That will be Edward Jones.
Eddie Jones, Mr. Eddie Jones, come on down. Jamie Flanagan, congratulations to you. You've been selected. You are our daily winner, and you've won an Irish rugby jersey, and you're going to go into the draw at 9:30 this morning for the amazing prize: flights to Paris, accommodation and tickets to France, Ireland, all courtesy of our friends at AerLingus. So in the draw, Declan Buckley, Jason O'Shea, Aaron Sweetman and Jamie Flanagan from earlier in the week as well. Owen must surely be raging. He was flown over to Wales for dry scones and not over to Paris for cheese boards and red wine.
I don't think I'll be allowed on a plane to Paris, to be honest. I think that's the subtext here, isn't it?
Well, there's been an issue with you in Paris before.
Correct.
Other people say you'll always have Paris, and you will be like, I'll always have Paris. It's kind of like a millstone that follows you around.
100%. So while I would like to be dining on French cheese right now and French wine, I just can't. I'm not allowed back.
Fair enough. 9:07. Here's what's coming up on OTB Sports Radio today. OTB Gold at 1 o'clock is Declan Murphy from Centaur. Leaders' Questions with Stuart Lancaster at 3. Our retro panel is Capturing Sporting Moments. I think that's the photographers panel. At 6, it's OTB Gold. Jerry Eisenberg on Muhammad Ali. Great stuff in that. And OTB Tonight live from 7. Of course, it's Thursday night, so that means Thursday Night Football with John Giles. More rugby and plenty more to get your teeth stuck into ahead of the hurling weekend as well. We're back after these talking Super Bowl. Mike Carlson.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station. The Football Pod on OTB Sports.
The only thing about Dublin that I'm worried about, right, is their fear factor is going to go. If someone draws Dublin now in a big game, there's going to be a different confidence to the opposition.
That was something we would have spoke about in our time at our absolute peak, that there were certain games we did not want to lose. Don't give them an inch. Keep them down. Keep your foot in their neck. And you're right. Once the cracks start appearing, that air of invincibility, it wanes a little bit.
For the latest on GAA, rugby, football and much more, download the OTB Sports app, turn on push notifications and hear it here first.
A quiet man of Gaelic football, I would say. I don't know if he's ever spoken in media circles. I haven't never seen him quoted anyway. But can you just talk to me about what he's brought to the table? I think he's got the 5 last Ulster titles under his belt between yourselves and Schlockneil. Like, the quiet man to the media, but I'm sure he's not too quiet behind the scenes with G.
Okay, he gets his point across the board, and like, because he's got that quiet incentive that anything he does say, you kind of take it on board because he doesn't speak that too often, and like he brings about that calmness that you see along the line, and like, you know, as a player, if you're looking along the line and seeing him maybe be an edge, you kind of be an edge yourself, but whenever you see him so calm along the line, it kind of settles through the whole team. And listen, we know what Mickey wants us to do in all the terms of football, so we just provide as best we can and feel for him.
If you're to pinpoint what exactly he does, what are his biggest strengths, would you say, Paul?
Probably belief in ourselves and just be ourselves on the field, and obviously carry into the game what you do in training. So the games are obviously won today, but like, we feel that the games were won maybe the two weeks of training beforehand, the in-house games, the unseen hours of practicing in certain aspects.
With prices from only €289 for fully comprehensive car insurance, everyone's making the jump to getsetgo.ie. New business policies only. Prices subject to minimum premiums. T's and C's apply. MCL Insurance Services Limited Trading is getsetgo.ie is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM. With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Yeah, in the ad break there, you're listening to Paul Devlin from Kilcoo talking to Will O'Callaghan and Michael Verney on the Club Championship show, talking about the great Mickey Moran, who's managing Kilcoo this weekend in the All-Ireland Club Final. I think it's his 5th senior All-Ireland final and still looking for his first victory, but has quietly put together one of the greatest managerial careers in Gaelic football. When you think of the teams that he's guided to, so frequently underdog teams, getting to finals and overachieving. And so I'm really hopeful that this weekend they get over the line. Stephen O'Keefe of Ballygunner also joined the show this week, and you can get that podcast in OTB GAA. Just search for the OTB GAA stream wherever you get your pods. On Saturday, the 12th of February, the All-Ireland Club Senior Hurling Championship Final, Ballyhale Shamrocks versus Ballygunner, Croke Park, 3 o'clock. Followed by the football, Kilcoo versus Kilmacud Crokes in Croke Park at 5. Both those games on TG Car. Club Championship coverage on Off the Ball is brought to you by AIB, proud sponsors of the football, hurling and camogie All-Ireland Club Championships. And you can check out the hashtag #TheToughest for more. 12 minutes past 9 this morning, time for us to turn our attention to Hollywood, where for the second time in a row there will be a home team in the Super Bowl, and I'm delighted to say Mike Carlson is with us. Mike, good morning to you.
That's Hollywood Mike Carlson to you.
Well, instead of Iron Mike, you've changed your name.
Yeah, I've changed. Yeah, I changed my name. I just want to say, if Owen or even you get in trouble in the States, give me a ring, because a couple of the guys I played with in college are ambulance chasers now in the States.
Okay, well, that is good.
Very good advice. Very good advice. Thank you, Mike.
There's a big kind of red emoji in case of emergency break glass beside your number from now on, Mike.
Yeah. I could be your interpreter in Paris as well, if you like that, because that's kind of like it's like there's 2 Super Bowls this weekend, isn't it?
They're all over the place. This is one of those annual all-time great sporting weekends. There's a nagging fear I have, though, that a team like the Bengals has got here, and it's been a great underdog story the whole way through, but so frequently a team like this actually ends up getting crushed in the final because they just can't deal with the pomp and circumstance, and they kind of reached the end of their road. Whereas it doesn't feel that way on the other side. With the Rams, you have a team who's back in this, who knows what's happening, who's at home, sleeping in their own beds, who has, I think, a significantly better coaching staff. Am I wrong to fear a blowout?
Well, I think there's three scenarios basically. The one that's eliminated is the Bengals winning in a blowout. I can see a lot of ways in which this game becomes a close one in the end, and most of those involve the Bengals coming from a deficit during the game, as they have done at each stage of the playoffs and actually in the weeks before. But you're absolutely right that a lot of this Rams team has been there before. They are at home, although a home field advantage is not in a Super Bowl is not as huge as it might be in other games because of the ticket allotment and the sleeping in your own bed thing. I think probably gets overrated because they do put the team in a hotel so that they don't get up to any hijinks, beforehand. But I think the Rams are definitely the better team. You've had this great run of playoff wins for the Bengals. The last one against Kansas City, it's really in a way hard to judge how much of it was the Bengals playing really well and how much of it was the Chiefs kind of self-destructing, not directly as an effect of anything that Cincinnati did. But the comparison I've been making, and I've seen other people, and not that I'm saying that Joe Burrow is Tom Brady or that the Bengals are the Patriots, but it's a lot like that 2001 Patriots team that sort of squeaked through in the playoffs, had a lot of luck if you consider the Tuck rule game against Oakland. And then when they got to the Super Bowl, came up with a great game plan that they executed to slow the Rams down and managed to hold on and win that game. The Rams were still in a position to win it, but Brady engineered the last field goal drive. I see something like that there, but I agree with you that this is not a Bill Belichick kind of coaching staff, Zach Taylor's coaching staff, and even more to the point, he was a Sean McVay assistant, so I don't think McVay will be in a sense overwhelmed, as you might argue he was when the Rams lost to the Patriots a couple of years ago, 13-3.
Let's concentrate then on the Bengals first, right? So Joe Burrow comes out of college a bit later than many people do. He's fairly similar age to some of the younger quarterbacks who have much more experience. I think he's relatively same age as Sam Darnold, for example. And his college career is this kind of remarkable, has a remarkable ending to it. But at the start, it wasn't amazing. It wasn't lights out. But something happens to him, he grows into a full, deeper understanding of it, blows out his knee in the first year. And as a result, they end up getting a really high draft pick again. So they picked twice very high, and they've done really, really well in the last two drafts. So something within the building, apart from not blowing the pick for Burrow, is going well beyond knowing not to blow the pick.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know because, lots of people were saying that they had the chance to get Penei Sewell, who was the best offensive tackle in the draft. And obviously Burrow had blown out his knee because he was being sacked so often. And even this year he was sacked, I think, 51 times in the regular season. He was sacked 9 times, and they won the playoff game against Tennessee. So the question was, do you provide him with a better line to protect him better, or do you go for his favorite college receiver, Jamar Chase? And watching them in Burrow's last year at LSU, they beat Alabama and they beat Clemson in the college playoffs, basically with Burrow and Chase playing pitch and catch. I mean, the two of them overwhelmed those teams who were better teams on paper, like the Rams are. So it was an interesting move. And the other thing is, and people I think overlook it because we talk about the Rams being a team of superstars who they've gone out and mortgaged the future to sign. But the Bengals are notoriously a cheap team. It's owned by the Brown family, and the Brown family run it like a family business. But they went out and they were very active in the free agent market this past year. Trey Hendrickson being the big ticket item, but they improved their defense on a lot of levels. And it was almost as if they sensed they had something good there. They gave Burrow the weapon he needed. They went out in free agency and strengthened their defense. And I think Zach Taylor felt that he could survive with Burrow under a lot of pressure because that's the kind of heady quarterback that he is, and he's willing to stand in the pocket. He's got a bit of mobility and can make things happen.
Is this likely to change the dynamic of how teams draft and how they recruit over the next little while, kind of handcuffing a quarterback to a receiver and looking at what they've done at college level? Because often a man becomes an island at the quarterback position as a young quarterback for an NFL team, and they perhaps haven't paid too much attention to how to allow him to hit the ground running, whereas this partnership obviously has been copied and pasted from Louisiana, and it's worked spectacularly.
Yeah, and you know, one of the dreads in the NFL, one of the real anomalies, is that the great college quarterbacks tend to go to the worst teams in the league, and they're often left hanging to dry. If you think of Trevor Lawrence this past year with Jacksonville. So, you know, I think this year they probably go offensive line will be their priority. When you look at their drafts, and Jer said they've had a series of good drafts. You know, T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, who are the second and third receivers, you know, were both high draft picks. Jesse Bates, who's a really good safety, was a high draft pick for them. So they've done very well. Sam Hubbard, who was a key player against Kansas City, they've done really well in those drafts. And I think that they will look at the need to improve, because with the best will in the world, they got a lot of breaks in winning their division. Injury and COVID really decimated both Cleveland and Baltimore, and Pittsburgh, of course, were running with Frankenstein's monster at quarterback. You know, Ben Roethlisberger, creaky spare parts keeping his body going. So, you know, it was almost like a perfect storm for them to be able to win that division. And I just, looking at it realistically, I would love to see the Bengals win. The line, I think, has gone from 4 to 4.5 overnight, but I thought it would be a bit higher than that. So, you know, I'm probably going to take the Bengals with the points and hope that they keep it close. And Evan McPherson kicks a couple of 50-yard field goals, because that, to me, is the best prop bet around, is to take McPherson kicking field goals.
I understand. I can see the rationale for that. The difficulty is that if you think back even to the final, was it week 18, when the Rams were actually killing the 49ers in the first half. That team, that offense was fairly explosive. They've been explosive in getting off to good starts since as well. And I would be concerned that this time, if the Bengals start slow, as they have done so frequently recently, and they've come back furiously and brilliantly in games that really drags everybody in watching them go, and this is great. I just feel like this time in McVay, if he does get a lead, he's going to be able to exploit that lead, because OBJ, it turns out, is still OBJ.
OBJ is, and that pickup, you know, is probably, you know, people make a big deal of their going out and trading draft picks for Jalen Ramsey and for Stafford, but really it was the in-season pickups this year. Von Miller on the defense and OBJ on the offense that kept the team going. And, you know, they needed a replacement for Robert Woods. People forget that they were 7-1 at the point where Robert Woods got hurt. And then they had a tough time adjusting. They picked up Deshaun Jackson, but he wasn't really the answer. After they got Beckham, and after he acclimated to this kind of offense, he looks like the old Odell Beckham, you know, and not the guy who was just not contributing in first New York and then Cleveland. But, you know, the game against San Francisco you mentioned was the first time in McVay's NFL career that he had lost a game where he led at halftime. So the question is, does that mean now he can lose other games, or does it mean that we'll revert back to form? And if he has the halftime lead, he'll be able to hang on to it. I thought that he tried really hard to lose that game against the 49ers, not that game, but the second game in the conference championship against the 49ers. He and Stafford, you know, both gave the 49ers opportunities to win that game, but the 49ers, in a sense, were trying just as hard not to win it. And they were lucky there. But like I said at the beginning, the Rams are the better team in both phases. You know, not on paper, but by if you watch the way the season progressed. So Cincinnati's probably in with a puncher's chance, as it were, and it's really hard to think that the Rams could contrive not to win this game. There's so much firepower there. Cup and Beckham. I suspect that they try to run the ball a bit because I think they think that their offensive line will be able to do that against a three-man front that the Bengals present. But the matchup that really stands out to me as being the one that decides the game, and it's all in the Rams' favor, is the Rams' defensive line against the Bengals' offensive line, which is their weak point, the Bengals' offensive line. They would like to run the ball, and you saw how they kept running on first down against the Chiefs, even when they were behind, simply because that's what their line does better than protect Burrow. But you've got Aaron Donald in the middle, who's the best defensive lineman in the league, and basically has to be double teamed at all times. One of the main reasons the Patriots beat them in the Super Bowl was that Joe Thuney single blocked Donald the whole game. They didn't double team him, and that left them free to do other things. Then you've got Von Miller and Leonard Floyd on the edges, and Floyd was another free agent they signed, and then after 1 year they gave him a big deal because he played so well. And with Miller there, he's playing even better. So you've got inside rush and outside rush. And Greg Gaines, the other defensive tackle, because he's always single teamed. He's a big load and he's quick. So you've got to basically you can present a four-man rush without having to bring extra blitzers in order to pressure the quarterback. And that means you can lie back and cover. And you've got Jalen Ramsey back there to cover. So, I'm really curious to see how they work this. If they do just stick with that rush, and do they put Ramsey on Chase, or do they put Ramsey on T. Higgins and double team Chase, put another corner on Chase and put a safety over him, and try to negate them that way? If they can negate both of those options, Joe Burrow doesn't have a whole lot. I mean, not that Boyd's not good, and if he has Ozama, the tight end back, who got hurt, that would be good news for them. But that to me is something I just see it's inevitable.
Yeah, it sounds like you're talking yourself into the Rams winning a close game.
That's the way I look at it. Yeah, I mean, if and that may be a little bit of my heart wanting it to be a good game, and my heart wanting the Bengals to make a good showing of it, because they're hard not to like, given the run that they've had. But yeah, I just can't get away from the idea that the Rams are going to win it.
Like what you're talking about there is probably going to be not a replica, but it's going to be close to what Burrow experienced against the Titans. Like, it has that experience where he gets sacked the most times in a playoff game and wins the game in whatever 50, 60 years. Like, does that experience bring on a quarterback like him to the point where he's like, screw it doesn't matter if our offensive line is crap, I can withstand that, and we've won a playoff game already in these circumstances?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. He seems to be able to shake that stuff off, and given that he had such a serious injury last season because he was being sacked all the time, it sometimes creates, when I was talking about quarterbacks going to the bad teams in the draft, you get like Carr when he was in Houston, David Carr, and he was sacked 67 times his rookie year. He was never the same guy after that. You learn bad habits to try to save your life, but that doesn't seem to have occurred to Burrow, and he's got a great set of receivers, so he can get rid of the ball quickly and try to keep himself standing up for most of the game. But like I said, it just seems like the Rams, inevitably are going to slow Joe Mixon down, slow the run game down, and then come at Burrow. And if they take a lead, and I agree with Jared that the Rams are quick starters. They do tend to play well in the first quarter, and I think they win the first quarter if you're looking for another good prop bet. But if they take a good-sized lead and they force Cincinnati out of that run first program, Cincinnati's in a lot of trouble.
Mike, for people in this part of the world, this is going to be the first Super Bowl in quite some time where they'll turn it on and you won't be on the television coverage on the Sunday night. How disappointed are you about this, first of all? And I guess in one sense, how is this going to change your entire experience of Super Bowl? Because between Channel 4 and BBC, you did become a staple of people flicking on the TV at 10 or 11 o'clock on this February Sunday night.
Yeah, well, I was really looking forward to going to LA, but actually the BBC coverage is going to be from from studio in London anyway. But yeah, I mean, it's so much more fun to do it on air than sitting at home, or or sitting with friends, or even out in a bar, watching it, because you can take a little time to analyze as it goes on, which is the thing. You can look at a replay, you can ask them to show you something a second time, so you get a better idea of it. And of course, there's nothing like being in the stadium, both for the atmosphere, but also for usually the better view of the game that you have. If you know the game, you know that people like to look at what they call coaches tape or all 22 tape, which is a high camera that shows you everything that's happening on the field. And in some games, when you're in that nice commentary position where you can see that, you can see things that are going to happen before they do, because you see the whole formation, you see how deep the safeties are, which you can't see on the coverage camera, and it just makes your commentary life so much easier, and your understanding of the game so much easier. But plus working with Nat and OC and Jason is fun. I mean, and when Chappers was hosting it, it's the same way. You just have a good time in between the bits on camera when you're talking about the game, occasionally arguing about the game. I just love it. It's the greatest thing in the world. I just think I was really lucky to do it for so many years.
So what is the plan for Sunday then?
Actually, I was asked not to take any other jobs on Sunday for reasons I won't go into, but it means I'll be watching it at home probably, or at best with a couple of neighbors who have a big screen TV, which I don't.
I'm going to safely.
I am old school to the end.
I'm going to safely assume that Joe Buck will bring you in via video link during the commentary.
Yeah, well, wouldn't that be? Wouldn't that be a kick? I suspect if Joe Buck was going to bring somebody in from Britain, it would be one of the people who works for NFL UK, just to make sure they stayed on message about Brian Flores et al.
We didn't even get into that, but that is the main story this week as well.
We can talk about that next week.
Definitely. Good stuff, Mike. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Oh, thanks, guys. Yeah, enjoy the game. And go Ireland on Saturday.
Thanks a million. Take care.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Mike Carlson there giving us his thoughts about the game at the weekend, and the same experience for all of us, I think, watching it at home late night, early morning, Monday. OTB AM brought to you live every morning by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, with your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Right. It is time to announce our winner of this week's amazing prize on OTB AM. It's all thanks to AerLingus. So it is flights to Paris, 2 nights accommodation, a signed Ireland rugby jersey, and most importantly of all, tickets to France against Ireland in the Six Nations at the Stade de France. We've had 4 daily winners this week. Whoever doesn't win the overall prize here, by the way, has already won an Ireland rugby jersey. So Monday's winner was Declan Buckley. Tuesday's winner was Jason O'Shea. Wednesday's winner was Aaron Sweetman. And Thursday's winner was Jamie Flanagan. They're all on the line at the moment. We've done the draw and we've picked our winner out of the hat. How long should I let this go?
Just leave. There comes a point where dead air just gets brought off the air. So can we push the boat out on this?
How long do you think it would be before the alarm sets off? Can we get another drum roll? And the winner is Aaron Sweetman. Aaron, are you there? Good morning, Aaron.
Hi, lads.
How are you doing?
I'm doing much better now.
You've got a weekend in Paris ahead of you.
Unbelievable. That's so good, lads. Thanks a million. I'm buzzing.
Who are you going to bring?
Well, I was supposed to be going for dinner on Saturday night with my girlfriend for Valentine's, so I'll have to break the news to her that we're off to Paris instead.
She's going to think that you planned this and that you're going to propose. So you just better be careful and make sure that doesn't come across.
Jesus, I never thought of that. You landed me in it there now, lads.
Well, maybe you will. Who knows? Maybe what we're doing is we're adding to the general joie de vivre. Paris on a Saturday night is very romantic. Either best of luck with that or just be careful. Whichever way, whatever way that's supposed to go. I don't know.
Is the ring included in the prize as well?
No, but it sounds like you're planning it. Are you? Is there anything you want to tell her here?
I'll save that for the weekend.
Listen, congratulations. Do you think we're going to win?
Oh, yeah, of course. I think the way we're playing the last couple of games, lads, I have a good feeling.
Well,
I've never been to a Six Nations game either, so it's not the worst.
Look, that's great. That's great. I'm delighted for you, and you will have a great weekend. Just don't get too carried away with the result if we do win, or else, right the moment, and sure, a little bit of history will be made in your lives. Who knows?
There's no one better than getting carried away than the Irish, is there? So it'll be tough, but we'll do our best.
Aaron, congratulations. Aaron Sweetman was Wednesday's winner, and courtesy of AerLingus, he's off to Paris for a romantic weekend, it turns out, with rugby, 2 nights accommodation, a signed Ireland jersey, and tickets to France against Ireland, and a bit of romance in the air, it sounds like, as well.
There's definitely, I'd say, big scorelines or good positive scorelines in France that have prompted people to get down on one knee in the past. It's like, I'm sure it's happened.
Spur of the moment.
Yeah.
Wake up the next morning going, well, we did win the game at least.
Well, the thing is, at least, the record in France hasn't been amazing. Maybe it's gone the other way on a lot of occasions.
I mean, I don't want to offer immediate commentary on somebody we've never known, but it did sound like there's a little bit of a...
Yeah.
It's not the worst idea you've had there.
Everything's on the table when you just want a free trip to Paris, I think.
OTB AM is brought to you live every morning by Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with our new and improved razors. Tomorrow morning, talking Liverpool, Six Nations with Alan Quinlan. Our GA quick picks and the crappy quiz is making a comeback. Have you written it yet?
No. Send in questions, everyone.
Oh yeah, what's the best play?
Send in your questions.
You actually want postcards, or
well, it's too late now to get them before.
I mean, there's other quizzes coming in the future.
There are, but look, all I care about is tomorrow. I don't care about next week.
Owen lives in the prison of a perpetual now.
Yeah, exactly.
You can send some in for next week if you would like.
You can do if you want. I guess future me will be happy with that. This week's me doesn't really care less, to be honest.
All right, right now we're leaving you at Wednesday Night Rugby. Enjoy.
Wednesday Night Rugby, loads to discuss. Opening round of the Six Nations, now moving into the distant past. We have a very nice round 2 coming our way. Ireland-France, of course, the big one on Saturday evening. The Scots, fresh from their Calcutta Cup winner in Cardiff. And England will play Italy on the Sunday. Very happy to bring in Rory O'Connor of the Irish Independent. Hey, Rory.
Hey, Joe. How's it going?
And we have teamed you up once again. Such was the success, such was the public demand after your last outing together with Chris Jones, BBC's rugby union correspondent. Chris, the people demanded it. The people are getting it. Wow.
Yes. Dream team. Hi, guys. How's it going?
Yeah, great. Why do you follow 0 people on Twitter?
That's a good spot. I didn't know anyone noticed that. It's kind of because maybe, when you get in the height of like Brexit or COVID, you're just getting a lot of people that you want to follow for, say, like a rugby reason, then also retweeting stuff that, I don't know. I'm not saying I don't want to hear loads of different views, because I obviously do. I just found it kind of a bit more therapeutic just to not follow anyone, as antisocial as that sounds. I haven't really thought about it much, but obviously I've done it.
You log on to Twitter, your feed is nothing. Maybe just tweets from Chris Jones. I don't know.
No, because then you can make these lists, can't you? So I could then do a list and have people on a list. So I do follow people. It's just a different type of following, if that makes any sense.
Interesting. Good for the soul, I would think. Good for the brain.
I need to put I'm not like antisocial and don't want to hear people's views. Come at me, say what you like.
Yeah. I think the truth here, Rory, is he's an incredibly arrogant man. He's not interested in the views of others.
It sounds like a lovely life.
It does, yeah.
I'd like that. I might follow his lead.
Gotta say.
So we have talked a lot about Ireland, and we will get to Ireland, but we have done an hour with Brian O'Driscoll in studio yesterday. There was Liam Toland and Jerry Thornley on Monday. Alan Quinlan's been on the AM show, Matt Williams on the AM show. We had Darren Cave and Fiona Hayes on the Sunday show. So let's just start in a different place and start with England. And Chris, that was the thinking in part in getting you on. So we talked with Rory late last year about this being a very interesting Six Nations campaign for Eddie Jones. It's just become a whole lot more interesting, I would say. Yeah. How much criticism is he on the receiving end of over there?
I think a reasonable amount, but I wouldn't say it's been an hysterical amount of criticism. I think it's been the criticism any coach would get when the Grand Slam's gone on day one, when the Grand Slam's gone for a 6th successive year, and when your side's lost the opener for the 3rd year in a row. Eddie Jones has, since that kind of golden run in 16 and 17, his record has been really up and down. 18 was a flop of a Six Nations, 21 was a flop of a Six Nations, 19 was middling, 20 was okay, and they won the whole thing, so great, but they'd lost on the opening night. The slam was gone. They relied on a losing bonus point, and they won it on points difference. 21, as we know, didn't go so well. Then he's had some great autumns, put Australia to the sword plenty, that amazing World Cup semi-final against New Zealand, that tactical masterclass against South Africa last time out. But then just when you think, right, is this the year that England really start to, put another Six Nations trophy back in the cabinet, it's gone on the opening day. And yeah, he's had injuries. And when you lose Farrell, you lose Laws. And the other players that are out, that's a big blow. But he took some gambles with that team selection. He didn't pick a ball carrier in the back line in the team or really on the bench. And the one guy who could maybe carry through traffic, Jack Noel, didn't get on for 82 minutes. The Smith-Ford substitution's been under the spotlight. I think that's one of those that can go either way. If that comes through, then that makes total sense. 78 cap veteran coming on the hour mark in the Murrayfield wet. Yeah, but certainly a few of his calls have been under scrutiny, which you would expect, for a rugby side like England.
I agree with you on the Marcus Smith substitution, for instance. Like, I know Clive Woodward in his column in the Mail went to town on Jones for that substitution, but I do agree that can go either way, and there is a logic in a more experienced head being brought on to see out the game. I suppose what surprised me and would have disappointed me most from an English point of view is that I listened to you and Matt Dawson interviewing Eddie Jones a couple of weeks ago in advance of this tournament, and the way he was talking about the trends in the game and the types of players he was bringing in suggested we would see running rugby, attacking rugby, expansive rugby, and we saw anything but, which really made me question what Jones has been working on over the last couple of weeks, unless he was just trying to rope-a-dope everyone, you and Matt Dawson included.
Well, he's not adverse to doing that. He's not adverse to saying something and doing something different. But I did believe him when he takes such a kind of forensic interest in rugby all over the world. So he's always looking at the way the game is reffed and the way the game is going in terms of attacking. And if England do lose a game at the breakdown, he'll come up with a theory and a reason why. I think a lot of his tactics were preordained on the weekend because he was spooked by the Murrayfield weather. I don't know if 2 years ago when it was storm, whatever it was, and that was a monsoon, those were unplayable conditions. Maybe he thought it was going to be similar, but actually it cleared up just before kickoff. And England played a fair bit of rugby, around the 10s, which, is all well and good. Then when they did have the odd opportunity, they couldn't execute. And I've just been surprised by the chat out of the England camp this last few days, which has been, we dominated possession and territory. Great. What does that mean? What does that mean in Test rugby? The All Blacks rarely dominate possession and territory. They do what Scotland did, which is when you do get a chance 40 metres out, you take your one-shot kill and you score 7 points. And you say to the team who's been banging away for half an hour, well, that was all well and good. We just did it in 7 seconds, which is what Scotland did with the Ben White try. So I was surprised at hearing that because that's the difference between a good team and a great team, or a good team and a bad team. Turning possession and territory, turning opportunity, and just saying things like, we just need to execute. But execution's kind of been England's issue for a while. This time last year, Calcutta Cup, they're kicking away overlaps because they had some success grubbering through a couple of championships ago. But that maybe is the consequence of not having a carrier in your back line. It means that you're just going to try and turn the opposition around, and you're not going to be comfortable setting it up, going through traffic or whatever. So it's a complicated one with England because he's picked a certain side, which I think was done to kick the ball and squeeze Scotland, and they just weren't able to. Got close, played well in a lot of facets of the game, but then lost their heads in the final quarter. And for an England side, that is a bit of a recurring theme, which I think will concern England fans.
Rory, thoughts on England and Jones?
Yeah, there's a lot going on with England at the moment. One thing, just listening to Chris there, struck me is that I've been thinking about this a little bit, that Joe Schmidt used to get obsessed by the weather as well. And I wonder if Southern Hemisphere coaches coming up here get a little bit obsessed by the weather, and when things, when the forecast is bad, they react quite strongly to it, and maybe don't trust the Northern Hemisphere players to have the skill set to go out and play in rough weather. Whereas Andy Farrell and Gregor Townsend, who both grew up in Northern Hemisphere conditions and played, their entire lives through it, were more trusting of their players to execute more attacking game plans and not as kind of, not go into their shells as much. I mean, Eddie Jones picked a team based on, that looked like it was a team picked on a weather forecast on Sunday, which is, at this stage of your development, you should be able to go and play. Even, obviously you make some allowances for it, but you don't like the idea that you don't want the ball at all. If you're supposed to be going down the road of a more attacking game plan, you don't just change that because the conditions are going to be bad. You got to still be able to play. There are examples either in the Southern Hemisphere in New Zealand or more recently up here of teams being able to play through the weather. So I just wonder whether having a Southern Hemisphere coach, although it gives you some great insight sometimes, can backfire. On the whole, I watched the England-Scotland game first in a kind of crowded place, so I didn't get a great sense of it. So I watched it back again a couple of days later, and I was surprised by how low quality it was. I thought, compared to France's performance, compared to Ireland's performance, on both sides there was an awful lot of mistakes. And England are just guilty of being a really muddled team throughout that second half, making bad decisions, making bad errors against a very good Scottish team who are on the up. But, you would expect this English team, even with all their changes and all of their, the issues that Chris has outlined already, to be better in that scenario. It was almost reminiscent of the 2015 World Cup game against Wales, where they were in a commanding position and just went to pieces, in front of their home audience on the biggest stage. The Rob Shaw moment is the one, leading example of that. But that game, they with Harry kept making bad decisions and bad errors and handed it back to them. And at this stage of Eddie Jones' time in charge, they really should be past all of that. You go back to all of the potential distractions off field. Eddie Jones writing a book about leadership where he criticises Maro Atoje's captaincy credentials when Atoje is clearly his best player and is the most obvious captain that I can see from the outside in that squad, and yet he's basically backed himself into a corner where he can't pick him because he wrote a book and mentioned it in it. He's tried to backtrack since, but what's he doing writing a book? And talking about current players in the middle of it all. There's just so much going on with England and so much going on with Eddie Jones that is fine once you're winning, but once it starts going wrong, you go back to that own slot piece a couple of months ago and all the churn of backroom team and the altercations with staff and not letting John Mitchell go see his son play cricket. There's just the mad stuff that's going on behind the scenes. Again, fine if you're winning, but as soon as things start going wrong, you can't imagine it's an easy place to be right now, and you wonder how long Jones can sustain it all.
Yeah. On what he said about Atoji, just in case anybody missed that, I might be wrong, but I'm not sure Maro is a future England captain. He's going to be one of the great players, but Maro is very inward looking. He drives himself rather than anyone else. And I think he sent him to acting classes. We've sent Maro to acting classes, which is having a beneficial effect. He speaks more influentially now, and I'm hopeful he can develop more communication and leadership skills. Acting brings Maro out of himself. How has all this gone down with Maro Atoje, I wonder, Chris?
Yeah, it's a very good question. What you will not get, really, is England players upsetting the apple cart. I think primarily because they want to stay in the side and win and play for their country. But there's an elephant in the room here as well. And the fact that, and I'm not referring to any individual here, I've got to stress that, but if an England player speaks up against Eddie Jones and is cast aside, not just do they lose caps, lose a chance of winning a World Cup and lose playing for their country, which drives them, they also lose an enormous amount of money. So what you won't really get, and I was speaking to an England World Cup winner in 2003 over a few drinks the other day, and they were saying how often they challenged Clive Woodward during the game, after the game, in the week, before the game. Different era, I know, but I just don't know how often that is going on. Maybe it's going on behind closed doors and we're not there privy to see it, but you don't really get that impression that there is an enormous amount of challenge. But that's not a new comment when looking at the Eddie Jones regime, and it was a criticism of the Lancaster era that it was a little bit too collegiate and collaborative, and the assistant coaches had too much sway. And with Eddie Jones, we know quite clearly who is in charge pretty much of English rugby, and it is Eddie Jones. And I don't think that's an inappropriate comment on the Atoje thing. Look, there's an argument that Atoje could have been England captain for 4 years by now, because when Dylan Hartley moved off the scene and done a really good job from 16 to 18, it looked like Atoje could have been that man to step in, because Farrell, you're always going to get a level of leadership. It reminds me of Sexton. It reminds me of Dan Biggar. You're always going to get a level of leadership from these kind of world-class competitors. Do they need to be captain as well, or do they then have so much focus on them? In the same way, Andy Farrell could have made James Ryan captain, couldn't he? Straight after the World Cup and gone, look, you can have 7-8 years in the role if you play your cards right. But he didn't. He went with Sexton, and Jones has gone with Farrell. But that inward comment is a funny one, because if you look at Jones's vice captains, Ellis Genge, Luke Cowan-Dickey, and Henry Slade, all great players, but you would never describe Henry Slade as an extrovert, or certainly doesn't give that image off to the media and to the fans. So, it's a tricky one. Yeah. I struggle with it myself. I completely agree with Rudd. Atoji has been that future England captain figure, but for whatever reason, and Jones outlined it in that leadership book, he just doesn't see him as a leader. Whether he will suddenly spring a surprise in 6 months' time and go, he's done his acting classes, now he's a captain. You never know with Eddie Jones. Maybe this is all part of a master plan to build Atoji up to that level. But yeah, certainly the fact that Atoji is not on the inner sanctum of England leadership does feel a funny one.
Well, I think that's all absolutely fine. And if that's Jones's assessment of Atoji's personality, no problem. It's the detailing it to the world and potentially embarrassing Atoji. I wouldn't like to be discussed in those terms. I wouldn't like to be called not a leader and inward looking, certainly not publicly. And by the way, tell the world I've been sent to acting classes as well. I mean, James Ryan may accept or not accept why he's not captain. I think he would have a legitimate point if Andy Farrell wrote a book about it, though, Rudd.
Yeah, and like, far be it for me to be poo-pooing, access or information or this kind of insight, because it's great. And even like England, released a video the other day of Atoji giving the kind of rallying speech in the dressing room after the game. So he's clearly reacting well to it. And this has been going on between Eddie Jones and Atoji throughout Eddie Jones' time. He used to describe him as a car. He used to compare it to different types of car when he first came in. And, if he was going well, he was a Ferrari, and if he wasn't, he was, I don't know, like he wasn't ever a Lada. But, it was kind of this sliding scale of, it was just this kind of mad thing where this guy is clearly an iconic or potentially iconic figure in English rugby. He transcends the game and is probably the only player in that squad, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but who kind of is more recognisable outside of rugby than anyone else. He's represented by Rock Nation. He is potentially your biggest star, and he's been kind of belittled in public by the coach. Certainly that's how I would perceive it, and it seems like a very strange thing to do. And maybe he knows Atoji a lot better than I do, and maybe he feels like these are the buttons he needs to push. But for me, possibly the two best team performances I've ever seen live are from this English team under Eddie Jones. The 2019 Six Nations dismantling of Ireland and the 2019 World Cup semi-final against New Zealand, like two of the most complete performances. And the man who's at the heart of both of those, in my view, was Maro Atoji. In that game against New Zealand, it was possibly the best individual performance I've ever seen from any player. And if I was a coach, and I'm not, and I'm not paid as much as Eddie Jones, but I also am not subject to the scrutiny he's subject to, that's the guy I'd be backing, and I'd be putting all my faith in rather than other people.
Chris, in terms of on the field approach then, so as I understand it, Manu Tuilagi played at the weekend and they're trying to get minutes into his legs. So you mentioned the ball carrier problem at Murrayfield. So let's say he comes back. He has a transformative, I think, ability for any team. Shoot this down straight away. Is there much talk in English rugby of have we passed on the Vunipola brothers too quickly here? One's 29, one's 31. I don't know what their form is like. I don't know what their fitness is like. I don't know where they are. But I mean, I know as an Irish fan scarred over the last number of years, if we pitch up in Twickenham in a few weeks and there's no Tuilagi and no Vunipolas, I won't be upset.
No. And look, Rudd mentioned Atoji in terms of those iconic England performances under Jones. And whatever happens, from here on into 2023 with Eddie Jones and England, however they do it the next World Cup, they've got that 2019 night in Yokohama where they basically knocked New Zealand off their perch and kicked them off their throne. And that'll be remembered by England fans forever. And not just Atoji was instrumental, but both Vunipolas and Tuilagi. And the Vunipolas, I think when it comes to Mako, there's been murmurings for a couple of years now that in terms of the set piece, he maybe is not the force he was. Marler is such an accomplished scrummager that they want him in and around the squad. Genge is a vice captain. So I think Mako, even though there's every chance he can come back in, I wonder if his magnificent England career might be it for him. Who knows? And Billy Vunipola, maybe they just feel that he's also reached an age where he's not quite as explosive as he was. But it's less about those individuals. It's more about Jones trying to make a statement about moving on from the Saracens core, moving away from the Vunipolas, moving away from Jamie George. the irony of that is that Farrell was still captain. So this is where it feels slightly contradictory, because on the one hand he's dropping Saracens players and saying we've got too much Saracens leadership, and then he has Farrell as captain, albeit with a younger and a very different, more sort of club diverse group of vice captains. But the Tuolangi thing, it's been the subplot of English rugby now for 11 years since his debut. 11 years. When Manu's fit, all is well in the world. He gives gain line, he holds defences, he allows the skillful players, and not that he isn't skillful, but he allows the Henry Slades, the George Fords, the Owen Farrells to shine, get people like Johnny May, Anthony Watson, Elliot Daly on the ball to make hay. Then he's not there, and Farrell plays at 12, and he's been kind of, he's really done England a magnificent service at 12, but it's always felt like, it's a stopgap, or let's get Tuolangi alongside Farrell with George Ford or whatever, maybe with Marcus Smith now. So what happens when Tuolangi's fit? He comes straight back in. He's played 20 minutes, and he won't play in Rome. He's not in the squad. I think he'll come off the bench against Wales, and he'll start against Ireland, all being well fitness-wise. So he then transforms England. They beat Ireland, do whatever happens in Paris, and then what happens if Tuolangi gets injured again, which is possible because of his record? Then are England scrabbling around looking for a midfield again? It's not sustainable for English rugby to be putting all of their eggs in the Tuolangi basket. Sam Warburton said this the other night on our Rugby Union Daily pod. He said, how many English qualified centres are there out there? It is insane. He used the word insane to put all of the stall in Tuolangi. But that's the reality, because when Tuolangi's fit, they've got a ball, a gain line midfielder. And when he's not fit, they go in with Henry Slade and Elliot Daly in the midfield. Completely different. So it's a completely different strategy. It's not like the All Blacks used to do. Marnonu or Sonny Bill. Both can give you gain. That's where it just... You feel that it can't just be up to Tuolangi to transform this England attack.
Yes. That's very interesting. Very muddled, all right. OK, well, we'll see how England go in Rome at the weekend. Our rugby coverage here on Off the Ball is with thanks to Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. We're here with Chris Jones and Rory O'Connor. So let's turn towards Paris Saturday evening. We've been congratulating ourselves all week. Chris, you might as well tell us how great we are as well.
Well, the only caveat I'd put to how good Ireland were was that I think most people saw that coming. Most people saw Ireland putting Wales to the sword because of how slick Ireland looked in the autumn, the fitness they've got in their squad, and the cohesion, the form of the provinces, and then also the poverty of Wales. So you put that together, and it was no surprise to see the game as one-sided as it was. And I think Ireland look the real deal, don't they? But it's a completely different challenge out in Paris. Their three best results under Andy Farrell: England, New Zealand in the autumn, England last year, New Zealand in the autumn, Wales just now. They've all been in Dublin. That's not their fault. They've only played in Dublin since the England game. But this is a completely different matter. France in a raucous Stade de France, smelling their first championship since 2010. So we're going to learn a lot more about Ireland, aren't we, after this weekend? We know they're a good side, full of good players. They look supremely drilled and well coached. But this is another matter altogether going over to Paris, I think.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I'm spooked by all the Irish predictions thus far, Rory. I would make France clear favourites to win by not much, but clear favourites to win.
3-point game in the bookies, Joe. So it's not as like people usually that's where you find the kind of more sobering read on how the game is going to go. But it was an Irish bookmaker I looked at, so maybe people are putting their money where their mouth is and moving the market. But certainly Ireland have what it takes to go there and win, but you would have certain reservations about the kind of the French power game across 80 minutes. And you go back to Leinster, La Rochelle. We have to start bringing Leinster games into this because Leinster provide the bulk of the squad, and the way La Rochelle beat Leinster in that Heineken Champions Cup semi-final shows a little bit of the way for France, especially because Weenie Antonio will play a tight head prop, and they will have the capacity to match Ireland's tight five power and then some. And then after 50 minutes, they'll bring on a like-for-like replacement in each position and ramp things up. I would expect Ian Henderson to go back into the match day 23. Perhaps he comes onto the bench along with, and comes off the bench with Finlay Bealham to kind of provide a bit of ballast to Finlay Bealham. But this is nothing on, Finlay Bealham's a fine player. He's done very well for Ireland, but we have never seen him go to this level. And that is the big question. Does Tadhg Furlong come off after 50, 60 minutes when he's spent And are you bringing on a player who can close out a game away from home in Paris? Not to put everything on one man, but if Finlay Bealham closes that game out, then he has answered pretty much every question about his role in this squad and has cemented his place in the pecking order. He's slightly smaller than the other front rows that Ireland have available. He's a lovely player, but he's not as explosive. It's a lot of pressure for him coming into this arena, and he will face a test unlike any other that he's had across his career, because that's where France will go after Ireland. They'll look to lock down that tight five. They'll look to tire out the props. They'll look to make sure that they are dead on their feet when they're trying to make those passes. It's all well and good making that pass when you're feeling fresh, but if you've been locked into scrums and it's been taken out of your legs, then things get much tougher. France will try and maul Ireland off the park. They'll try and they've got all the out the back capabilities as well, but they have like a tractor lock in Paul Valemsa, who's I can't remember exactly what weight. I think 134 kilos. I could be wrong. And Antonio is the heaviest player in the tournament, and they've got him fit, and they're both fit, so that like they will cause Ireland no end of problems. So that's where the game will be won and lost, and that's where Ireland haven't been asked the questions, because New Zealand came to Dublin with possibly their least skillful front row, of the last 10-15 years. Wales don't really have that in their armour, and it was less of a factor in the England game last Six Nations, because Porter hadn't switched across. But Ireland's game is so based around those players being able to do what they do, and every forward being a viable option and a carrier and a passing threat as well, that if Ireland gets sucked into a real battle and those forwards are tired, what happens then? Or if they don't win the gain line, what happens then? We don't know yet. We haven't seen it in the last, since probably Twickenham in or maybe it's the France game last year was the last time Ireland properly got beaten up, but it's been a while, and that's the test for this team now, that they're on a crest of a wave, 9 unbeaten, but the last 7 of those have all been at home. This is a very different challenge, and it's a great position to be in, to go and see if they've made those improvements to that degree.
And that's the kind of sobering negative slant that makes me feel more comfortable, I have to say, Chris. How do you see that battle up front then?
Yeah, I think it's in France's hands, and that's only because of the example. Rod cites those examples of Leinster being beaten up by La Rochelle, England getting the better of Ireland a few times at Twickenham through 2020. This is a different Ireland side. They're playing with more dynamism. They're not sending runners out to be lambs to the slaughter to an oppressive defence, but fascinating, isn't it? Sean Edwards, Mike Cat coaching the Ireland defence, Sean Edwards masterminding the French defence. I do wonder whether, Sean Edwards just... He constantly, I think he's got such motivation to take this French side to real heights. He's obviously coached so much for Wales in the Six Nations, gone up against all these different coaches. But I think with France, he feels that he could have such a transformational impact on French rugby because, with all the great work that other coaches are doing, and Laurent Lebeat with the backs and Ibanez and Galtier, Edwards is the guy who's come from outside in, and he's the example of the French bucking the trend. Rather than go for the all French coaching team, they've actually gone, right, we're gonna get some external influence, and he's no doubt been a part of the way they look more drilled, they look fitter, so they are ominous. We don't quite know yet mentally if the French can still be exploited. We saw their complete brain explosion in Paris against Scotland, where I think Bruce Doolan kind of thought he needed to keep playing almost for some kind of Gallic pride, when in reality he walks that out and France win the game, and then Scotland don't go to Paris and win, and things could have been so different for the table and even for Scotland players getting on that Lions tour, but that's another one altogether.
OTB AM with Gillette. Put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.